Hey guys, tonight we're rewinding the cosmic clock back to 432 BCE specifically, a sticky Athenian summer night. Forget your cozy mattress and Wi-Fi, you're trudging uphill on the Acropolis' limestone path, sandals scraping grit, the scent of roasted lamb and honey cakes from the city below mingling unhelpfully with the distinct odor of, well, let's just say ancient sanitation wasn't winning awards. A stray goat bleats somewhere in the dark, and you're pretty sure that shadow just moved. Welcome to Athens, birthplace of democracy and also, apparently, birthplace of watch where you step. Surviving tonight not guaranteed. But hey, no pressure, you've been mysteriously summoned by a job posting etched on a clay shard, urgent, divine avian maintenance assistance wanted. Must tolerate night shifts, sharp beaks, and existential dread. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, drop a comment to tell me your city and what time it is for you right now. Are you in Tokyo with dawn breaking or sipping midnight coffee in Berlin? Let's feel that global yawn together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The torch in your hand sputters, casting jumpy shadows on the weathered stone walls flanking the path. Above you, the Parthenon's silhouette cuts a jagged black hole in a sky salted with stars, more stars than you've ever seen, unpolluted by city glare. The air hums with cicadas and distant lyre music, punctuated by the occasional shout from the agora below. Your sandal slips on a slick patch of something organic. You catch yourself muttering a very modern word under your breath. A passing priest in a simple woolen chiton side-eyes you. Mind the offerings, he says dryly, gesturing to a smeared puddle near a small shrine to Hecate. The dogs got into the sacrifices again. You press on, the summons burning a metaphorical hole in your pouch. Why, maybe it was that time you nursed a sparrow back to health. Or maybe the gods just enjoy tossing mortals into bizarre situations. The path curves, and suddenly, you're facing a less imposing, older structure tucked against the north slope of the Acropolis, the Erechtheion. Unlike the Parthenon's confident Doric grandeur, this temple feels complicated. Asymmetrical porches jut out at odd angles, and the famous porch of the Maiden's 6 stone caryatids holding up the roof with serene, impossible strength seems to watch you approach with stoic curiosity. But your destination isn't the main sanctuary. A narrow, unassuming doorway, guarded by a single sleepy-looking attendant, yawns open in the temple's shadowed flank. Above it, carved deep into the lintel stone, is the unmistakable outline of an owl. The attendant, a wiry man named Lycos, as you'll soon learn, barely glances at your clay shard token. He just grunts and jerks his thumb inside. Down the stairs. Don't trip. And don't make sudden noises near the periclean. His voice drops to a reverent whisper on the last word. You duck inside. The air changes instantly, cooler, damper, smelling of earth, lamp oil, and feathers. A steep, narrow staircase descends into near total darkness. Your torch is the only light, flickering wildly as you descend. The steps are worn smooth by centuries of feet. 20 steps down, the passage levels out into a low-ceilinged, rock-cut chamber. It's surprisingly spacious, lit by a few small, smoky oil lamps placed in niches. The walls are rough-hewn, not the polished marble above. This is old Athens, deep below the gleaming surface. And then you see it. Perched on a thick, olive wood branch mounted on a polished stone pedestal in the chamber's center, is an owl. Not a cute, cartoonish owl. This is Athena Noctua, the little owl, but rendered almost mythical by context. It's larger than you expected, maybe a foot tall. Its plumage is a complex tapestry of browns, whites, and grays, perfect camouflage for rocky outcrops. But what pins you in place are its eyes. Huge, round, and liquid gold in the lamplight, they fix on you with an unnerving, unblinking intensity. This is no pet. This is a vessel, the living embodiment of Athena's wisdom, vigilance, and tonight, apparently very specific grooming needs. This is the sacred owl of Athens. A low murmur draws your attention. 3 figures in undyed wool robes stand near the owl, heads bent together over a large papyrus scroll spread on a low stone table. Their faces are etched with concentration, illuminated by a small lamp. One traces a finger along a complex diagram. Can't risk the Pianepsia moon, a woman with silver-streaked hair hisses. The new growth would still be vulnerable during the Proeresia rites. The smoke alone. Argos insists the Scorpion's rise aligns better this year, counters a younger man, pointing emphatically at a cluster of dots. The nights are cooler then. Less stress during the molt. The third, an older man with a beard like storm clouds, sighs, rubbing his temples. The priestess of Athena Polias dreams of owls shedding feathers over the peplous weaving. An ill omen if it coincides. We must time the peak shedding after the Panathena procession delivers it. Mainstream history drop. This intense discussion, it's the core of Athenian state religion intersecting with practical biology. The sacred owl wasn't just a symbol, it was a living, breathing national treasure. Its health and presence were seen as directly linked to the city's fortune. Messing up its molt wasn't just bad zookeeping, it was practically treason. Weird little nugget. Ever heard of a Scorpion's rise? They're debating the heliacal rising of the constellation Scorpius, just before dawn. Ancient Greek aviculturists, a generous term, believed specific celestial events influenced feather health. Too much sun associated with Apollo during early growth bad. Cool, moist nights under Artemis's moon good. It was a celestial balancing act. The scholarly side-eye. Historians still scrap over how many sacred owls existed. Was it one revered bird replaced discreetly or a lineage kept in secret? The secrecy here hints at the latter, but temple records purposely vague. Protecting divine secrets, or covering up the occasional, feather-related mishap, we'll never be entirely sure. You stand frozen, feeling like you've walked into the middle of a divine board meeting. The owl's head swivels almost 180 degrees. Those golden discs lock onto you again. It lets out a soft, low quack. The 3 priests snap their heads up. The storm-bearded man, clearly the head honcho, fixes you with a gaze as intense as the owl's. You. The new pterocopus, he states, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber. The word literally means feather cutter, but you sincerely hope it's metaphorical. Welcome to the heart of Athena's vigilance. That, he gestures gravely towards the owl, is Pericles. Not the Pericles, he adds quickly, seeing your eyes widen. Just, named in hopeful tribute. He, the priest emphasizes the pronoun, begins his great shedding soon. Your task is simple. Ensure not one pin feather is disturbed before its time, and ensure every new one grows strong, straight, and shining like polished bronze. He pauses, letting the weight of this simple task sink in. The owl, Pericles, fluffs up his feathers slightly, looking profoundly unimpressed. Fail, the priest says softly, his eyes glinting in the lamplight, and the wrath of the owl-eyed goddess will be the least of your worries. Lycos, who followed you down silently, chuckles darkly from the shadows near the stairs. First rule of Feather Club, he whispers, just loud enough for you to hear. Don't blink first. Pericles stares. You stare back. Somewhere, deep in the earth beneath the Acropolis, the gears of a celestial clock begin to turn. Your new career in divine avian cosmetology has begun. Pericles' stare isn't just looking at you, it feels like it's dissecting your very soul through layers of pre-dawn grogginess and existential dread. Those unblinking golden orbs hold the weight of centuries, the collective anxiety of a city-state, and the distinct judgment of a creature who knows exactly how unqualified you are. Lycos nudges you forward with a bony elbow, his whisper cutting through the lamp smoke haze, "Don't take it personal." He judges everyone like that. Even High Priest Timon over there Pericles once stared him into dropping his lunch offering. Sacred lentils everywhere. Disaster. You inch closer, the cool, damp air of the rock-cut chamber clinging to your skin. The three priests, High Priest Timon storm-bearded, Elpis the silver-streaked woman, and young, intense Lysander resume their hushed debate over the papyrus star chart. But your focus is pulled magnetically to the owl. Up close, Pericles is magnificent. His plumage isn't just feathers, it's a dense, intricate forest of barred browns, speckled creams, and soft grays, each filament catching the lamplight like spun metal. He shifts slightly on his olive branch perch, the movement silent as falling snow. You notice tiny, fluffy down feathers peeking out near the base of his contour feathers, the first whispers of the incoming molt. They look impossibly delicate. Your first lesson, Pterocopus, Timon rumbles without looking up from the scroll. He points a gnarled finger at Pericles. Respect the feather. Each one is a gift from the owl-eyed one, a conduit for her divine gaze upon the city. A single feather out of place during the Panathenaea, an ill omen that could sour trade deals, blight crops, or worse, make the assembly extra argumentative. He shudders theatrically. Lycos hands you a small, polished bronze tray. Hold this. Steady. No wobbling, unless you fancy explaining to Athena why her owl's dinner is on the floor. He retrieves a clay bowl from a niche, filled with plump, wriggling noxioid moths, fat, dusty brown creatures drawn to the temple lamps outside. With surprising dexterity, he selects one and offers it to Pericles on the tip of a slender ivory pick. The owl's head snaps forward. A flash of a sharp, hooked beak, a soft snick, and the moth vanishes. Pericles swallows, his gaze never leaving yours. You feel like the next course. Mainstream history drop. This intense focus on a single bird wasn't vanity, it was statecraft. The sacred owl wasn't merely associated with Athena, it was a physical manifestation of her protective power over Athens. Its presence or absence, or poor condition, was interpreted by priests, politicians, and the populace as a direct divine commentary on the city's health. Oracle consultations often began with the question, "How fares the owl?" Weird little nugget, get this: the owl had its own personal scale. Once a week, under strict ritual conditions, specific moon phase, specific incense burning, Pericles was gently coaxed onto an exquisitely balanced bronze scale pan. Counterweights, tiny, meticulously carved stone owls were used. Why? The priests believed a stable weight was crucial for successful molting. A sudden loss meant illness, a gain meant, well, too many moths, probably. But the ritual was deadly serious. The weight was recorded on a wax tablet stored in a cedar wood box labeled Hieros Baros Sacred Weight. The scholarly side-eye, what happened if the owl did get sick or die? Ancient sources are frustratingly coy. Some historians argue ailing owls were secretly replaced under cover of night, a feathered doppelganger conspiracy. Others point to fragmentary temple expense records mentioning unfortunate nocturnal rites by the sea involving owls and weighted sacks. The implication: ritual drowning to avoid public panic. It's a dark, unresolved corner of Athenian sacred zoology. Elpis approaches you, her expression softening slightly. The molt, she murmurs, gesturing towards the downy patches on Pericles' breast, is not merely shedding. It is rebirth. The old armor falls away, leaving vulnerability. The new must grow strong, straight, perfect. It demands precision. Not just in care, but in time. She taps the papyrus scroll where Lysander had pointed earlier. The stars and moon dictate the rhythm. Begin too early, the new feathers are weak, prone to breaking under the gaze of the summer sun god. Too late, she glances meaningfully at Timon. The autumn rains bring damp, mold, feather rot. A catastrophe. Lysander leans in, his voice tight with urgency. The scorpion must be clear of the horizon before the first primary feather drops. Argos observed it last year. The alignment coincided with Pericles' smoothest secondary covered molt on record. But Elpis fears the Pianepsia moon's influence on the Peplus. Timon slams a hand on the stone table, making the scroll jump. Enough. The owl is not a pawn in your astronomical bickering. Timon gestures emphatically at Pericles, who fluffs his feathers disdainfully, is the priority. We observe. We record. He turns his stormy gaze on you. Pterocopus. Your duty begins now. Observation. Every shift, every preen, every hork. As if on cue, Pericles swivels his head away and coughs up a small, compact pellet of fur and bone onto the floor. Lycos swoops in with a small bronze scoop. Trophy from last night's patrol. Field mouse. Efficient. He deposits the pellet into a decorated ceramic jar. We keep these. Don't ask why. Ritual stuff. Smells terrible by summer's end. Timon hands you a thin, wax-coated wooden tablet and a bronze stylus. Record everything. Hour. Behavior. Feather condition. Use the symbols Lysander will show you. Lysander quickly sketches simple icons: an eye for watching, a feather for preening, a moon for resting, a tiny agitated stick figure for, well, Pericles' frequent bouts of divine irritation. Start tonight. Lycos will show you the observation nook. Do not fall asleep. Do not drop the tablet. Do not, he leans in, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, make direct eye contact while he's eating. He finds it rude. A rude owl is a difficult owl. Lycos leads you to a shadowed alcove barely large enough to squat in, furnished with a thin cushion and a tiny oil lamp. Cozy, a best seat in the house for the feather opera. He gestures towards Pericles, now meticulously running his beak through the feathers on his back. Watch the preening. That's where you'll see the first signs. A feather gets loose, itchy, he'll worry at it. Your job, note which feather, where. But don't intervene. Not yet. The great shedding starts when he says it starts. Not the stars, not the priests, and definitely not some itchy feather. He grins, a flash of teeth in the gloom. Get comfy. Only 6 more hours till dawn. Try not to breathe too loudly. He hates that too. You settle onto the thin cushion, the cool stone wall at your back. The stylus feels heavy in your hand. Pericles, finished with his ablutions, swivels his head and fixes you once more with that unnerving, all-knowing golden stare. The oil lamp sputters. Somewhere, water drips. The weight of the feathers, the city, the gods, settles onto your shoulders. You take a slow, silent breath. The vigil has begun. The air in the observation nook is thick with the scent of lamp oil, damp stone, and the faint, dusty aroma of owl. Your legs have long since passed uncomfortable and entered the realm of questioning their very existence. Pericles, however, remains the picture of stoic vigilance. He alternated between intense preening sessions, the rhythmic shhhk of his beak combing through feathers becoming the soundtrack of your night, and periods of utter stillness, broken only by the slow blink of those golden eyes. You've filled half your wax tablet, moon symbol. Moon symbol. Feather symbol breast, light preen. Eye symbol staring at wall crack. Eye symbol staring at Lyco's sandal strap. Tiny agitated stick figure brief fluff up when a drip echoed too loudly. Riveting stuff. Just as you're contemplating carving a tiny sleeping stick figure for yourself, Lysander appears at the alcove's edge, holding an object that makes your tired eyes widen. It's a bronze disc, about the size of a large plate, intricately engraved with concentric circles, tiny symbols, and radiating lines. It gleams dully in the lamplight. Observation shift over, Pterocopus, he announces, a hint of excitement cutting through his usual intensity. Time for the real work. We have a schedule to finalize. And you, he taps the disc, get to meet the astrolabos. He leads you back to the stone table where the papyrus star chart still lies. Timon and Elpis are already there, Timon frowning at a clay tablet covered in calculations, Elpis meticulously grinding something fragrant dried lavender in a small mortar. Lysander places the bronze disc carefully on the table beside the papyrus. This, he says, his voice dropping reverently, is how we translate the dance of the stars into a timetable for feathers. The astrolabos. Not for navigating the sea, but navigating the perilous skies of molting season. Mainstream history drop. This, right here, is cutting-edge ancient Greek astronomy meeting practical necessity. While astrolabes like this early model, a planispheric astrolabe, were primarily used for telling time, predicting sunrise-sunset, and basic celestial navigation, the Athenians and others absolutely applied them to religious calendars and agricultural cycles, using it to pinpoint the optimal time for a sacred owl's feather regeneration, that peak Athenian blending of the cosmic and the civic. They believed celestial harmony directly influenced earthly events, down to the microscopic growth of a feather barb. Weird little nugget, forget fancy star charts for a moment. One critical factor in setting the molt schedule: pigeon migration patterns. Seriously. Priests observed that when certain high-flying pigeon flocks passed over Attica on their way south, the nights reliably started cooling just enough to be comfortable for new feather growth without being damp. It was a rough, avian weather forecast embedded in the celestial calculations. Miss the pigeon window, risk a sweaty, irritable owl with brittle feathers. The scholarly side-eye. Historians fiercely debate how accurate these temple astrolabes actually were. Were they precise instruments calibrated by skilled astronomers like Meta, who worked on the Athenian calendar, or more symbolic ritual objects? The level of detail in surviving temple instructions suggests real observational use, but replicating their star positions today often shows creative interpretations. Was it genuine error, intentional obfuscation to preserve priestly authority, or did the gods just nudge the stars a little for their favorite owl? The debate feathers on. Lysander points to a specific symbol on the papyrus chart, a stylized scorpion. The heliacal rising of Scorpius, he explains. When the constellation first becomes visible just before dawn after being hidden by the sun's glare. This event signals the waning of the fiercest summer heat and the increase in night moisture, perfect conditions for initiating the anabole, the growth phase. He picks up the astrolabe, aligning a rotating pointer, the alidade, over a series of markings. But it's not just when Scorpius rises. It's where. He squints, rotating the disk slowly. Its position relative to the moon's phase, and crucially, to Selene's own brightness. Elpis looks up from her grinding. Selene's light is nourishing, but too much during the delicate anabole. She shakes her head. It dries the forming barbs, makes them brittle, like overbaked clay. The pepless weaving begins under the Pianepsia moon, a full moon, bright as a silver drachma. If Pericles is shedding heavily, then, the loose down, it could drift onto the sacred loom. An omen of Athena's displeasure with her own new garment. She shudders. The priestess Polias would have kittens. Figuratively speaking. Timon grunts, pushing his clay tablet towards Lysander. Argos's calculations from the hill of the nymphs. He insists the scorpion rises high and clear on the 17th of Hecatombaean. The moon then is a waning crescent. Dim, gentle. Ideal. He jabs a finger at Elpis' mortar. But your dream omens, Elpis. Elpis meets his gaze steadily. The owl shedding over the half-woven peplus was clear, Timon. Vivid, the feathers turned to ash as they touched the linen. Ash, Timon. She holds up a pinch of the lavender powder. We need the buffer. The scorpion's rise plus 7 days. Let the crescent wane further. Let the night deepen its hold. Then we initiate. Lysander looks pained, caught between celestial mechanics and divine nightmares. 7 days, that pushes us perilously close to the dog star's zenith. Sirius blazes its hottest then. The stress on Pericles during the energy-intensive growth phase. You watch the debate swirl, feeling utterly out of your depth. Stars, moons, weaving goddesses, angry constellations, and a very grumpy owl waiting for his salon appointment. Lysander suddenly turns to you, the astrolabe glinting. Here. Hold this. He places the surprisingly heavy bronze disc in your hands. It's cool, smooth, edged with a miniature cosmos. See this pointer, align it with this marking, representing the celestial pole, roughly. He guides your hands, rotating the disc. Now, imagine the horizon, here. The ecliptic path, here. Now, for the 17th. He moves the alidade, muttering about declinations and ascensions. The tiny engraved stars seem to swim before your tired eyes. There. See, Scorpius's claw just breaches the horizon line at the calculated dawn hour. Now, add 7 days. He adjusts the disc again. His brow furrows. The moon, it's nearly new. Very dark. Good for minimizing light stress. But Sirius. Sirius is high. Very high. It's heat. He looks genuinely troubled. Elpis places a calming hand on his arm. We mitigate the heat, Lysander. Cool baths in the dawn light. Increased shade cloth in his daytime roost. Double the water offerings, chilled from the deep cisterns. And this, she gestures to the lavender powder now mingling with dried crushed rose petals in her mortar, for his nerves. The peplous omen cannot be risked. The city's fortune hangs on that robe. Pericles' feathers and Athena's garment must be pristine. Timon sighs, a sound like stones grinding. He stares at Pericles, who chooses that moment to let out an impressively large yawn, revealing a startlingly pink maw. Very well, Timon rumbles. We split the difference. The observation window opens on the Scorpion's dawn the 17th. But the active molt initiation. He pauses, looking at each of them. We wait for the sign. Lysander blinks. The sign? What sign? Elpis smiles faintly. The feather sign, of course. Timon nods solemnly. When Pericles drops his first primary feather, naturally, of its own accord, then we know the celestial clock within him has aligned with the heavens. That feather, he points dramatically at the owl, will be our true starting gun. We catch it. We read it. Read it, you echo, bewildered. Elpis picks up a pair of delicate bronze tweezers and a small, polished magnifying lens made of rock crystal. Oh yes. The first fallen feather holds omens. The direction it points as it falls. The condition of its tip. The pattern of its barbs under the lens. It tells us if the stars are truly in accord, or if adjustments are needed. She gives Lysander a pointed look. Astrolabes are clever, child. But Athena speaks through her owl's feathers. That is the final authority. Lysander looks like he wants to argue physics, but bites his tongue. Pericles ruffles his feathers, preens a single primary on his left wing with exaggerated care, and lets out a soft, almost dismissive whoo. The schedule hangs in the balance, suspended between bronze calculations, priestly dreams, and the whims of a single, divinely appointed bird. Your job description just expanded to include feather divination. You glance down at the cool weight of the astrolabe in your hands, a map of the heavens, and then at Pericles, a map of divine impatience. The countdown hasn't just started, it's become a sacred guessing game. The air in the chamber hums with a new kind of tension. Forget the abstract debates about constellations, the waiting game has begun. Every shift of Pericles' feathers, every preening session, every disgruntled queue is scrutinized under the collective, anxious gaze of the feather priesthood. You've become part of a sacred stakeout, your observation nook now a command post for monitoring potential feather fall. Lycos has taken to miming dramatic feather drops behind Timon's back, earning a withering glare from Elpis and a stifled snort from you. Pericles, meanwhile, seems to be enjoying the heightened attention. He preens with theatrical flair, occasionally lifting a wing and giving it a deliberate, slow-motion shake, as if taunting them. Is this the one? How about this one day's blur? The promised Scorpion's dawn arrives. You accompany Lysander and Argos, a stooped, perpetually squinting older priest who spends his nights on the Hill of the Nymphs with a simpler sighting tube to the Acropolis summit just before first light. The city below is a sea of shadows, the Saronic Gulf a sheet of dull pewter. Argos points a trembling finger east. There. Antares. The heart of the Scorpion. Sure enough, a single, fiercely red star glimmers just above the dark line of the High Meadows Mountains. Lysander lets out a breath you didn't know he was holding. Confirmed. The window is open. Back in the chamber, the news is met with grim nods. The astrolabe's calculations held. Now, everything hinges on one irritable bird and his shedding schedule. The atmosphere becomes a peculiar mix of ritual and high-strung biology lab. Elpis burns specific incense, blends myrrh for purification, crushed cypress needles for grounding near Pericles' perch, the fragrant smoke curling upwards. Timon chants low hymns to Athena Ergone, goddess of craft and diligence, specifically feather diligence, apparently. Lysander constantly checks small, porous clay pots filled with water placed strategically around the chamber, primitive hygrometers to monitor humidity levels crucial for new feather formation. Argos mutters about Sirius' rising angle and thermal stress coefficients only he understands. And you watch. You record. You try not to sneeze. Mainstream history drop. This intense micromanagement of a sacred animal's biological process wasn't unique to Athens. The Egyptians did it with apis bulls, the Romans with sacred geese. But the Athenians combined it with their trademark philosophical bent. They saw Pericles' mold not just as a physical renewal, but as a microcosm of the polis itself, shedding the old, vulnerable during transition, reliant on divine favor and precise civic order to emerge stronger. Messing up the mold was akin to political chaos. Weird little nugget, the priests had a specific feather landing zone. Directly beneath Pericles' perch, a finely woven linen cloth, bleached dazzling white, was spread over a shallow bronze basin filled with purified water. Why water? They believed catching the first feather before it touched the earth preserved its celestial moisture, making its divinatory properties clearer. It was like a sacred feather catcher's mitt. The scholarly side-eye, how widespread was feather divination pteromancy in ancient Greece? Evidence is spotty. Some scholars argue it was a niche practice, possibly unique to the Athenian owl cult or exaggerated by later sources. Others point to scattered references in obscure texts about reading bird flight feathers for omens. The level of detail here, the direction, the tip condition suggests a highly developed, if secretive, system. Was it genuine belief, or an elaborate way for priests to retain control over the uncontrollable, i.e. a bird's molt? The jury's still out, feathers ruffled. It happens on the third night after the scorpion's dawn. Pericles is engaged in a particularly vigorous preening session on his right wing, contorting his neck in impossible ways. You're noting feather symbol R wing, primary region, aggressive preen when you see it. A single, long, dark flight feather, a primary remix, detaches. It doesn't flutter. It drops, straight as an arrow, silent as a shadow. Time seems to freeze. Lysander's stylus hovers over his tablet. Elpis's hand stops mid-incense sprinkle. Timon's chant dies in his throat. Argos squints harder, as if trying to calculate its trajectory mid-air. Plink! The feather lands perfectly in the center of the white linen cloth, its tip just kissing the surface of the purified water below. It points unerringly towards the small shrine of Nike Apteros, wingless victory, tucked in a corner niche. A collective gasp, then utter silence. Pericles finishes preening the spot where the feather was, gives his wing a satisfied ruffle, and closes his eyes, looking profoundly bored by the drama he just caused. Now, Timon breathes, the word heavy with ritual significance. Elpis is the first to move, gliding forward with the reverence reserved for handling newborn gods. She holds up a hand, stopping Lysander, who's vibrating with scientific curiosity. Protocol, Lysander. Direction first. She carefully studies the fallen feather. It points to Nike Apteros. Victory grounded, yet eternal. She nods slowly. A favorable sign. The mold begins under the promise of enduring triumph, even if wings are temporarily under renovation. Timon grunts approval. Nike favors the undertaking. Proceed. Elpis then produces her bronze tweezers and the rock crystal lens. With surgeon-like precision, she lifts the feather from the linen, letting the purified water drip from its tip back into the basin. She holds it up to the lamplight, peering through the lens. The calamus. She murmurs, examining the hollow shaft base. Smooth. Unbroken. Clean detachment. Excellent. She rotates the feather, inspecting the tip. Intact. No splitting. Strong. She moves the lens along the vein, studying the barbs and barbules, the tiny hooks that zip feathers together. The pattern. She falls silent, her brow furrowing slightly. Lysander can't stand it. What about the pattern? Barbule alignment, hook density, is it indicative of structural integrity for the incoming growth phase? Elpis lowers the lens, her expression unreadable. The barbs, they cluster slightly denser near the tip. Acarimbos formation. Lysander blanches. Acarimbos, but that S associated with sudden heat stress during early growth. Argos finishes grimly, peering over Elpis's shoulder. See the clustering, it's a signature of rapid keratin contraction under unexpected thermal pressure. Sirius. I told you the dog star's zenith was too close. Timon's storm cloud beard seems to bristle. The feather speaks of heat, but Nike blessed the direction. Contradiction. Elpis shakes her head slowly, turning the feather thoughtfully. Not contradiction. Nuance, Timon. The direction promises ultimate success, Nike's favor. The Carimbos. She looks towards Pericles, now serenely dozing. It is a warning. The path to renewal will have a fiery challenge. The heat of Sirius will press upon him during the vulnerable growth phase. Lysander groans, running a hand through his hair. The astrolabe warned us. We need to intensify cooling measures immediately. Double the shade sails. Triple the dawn baths. Perhaps even relocate his daytime roost deeper into the north crypt. It's cooler there, though the ventilation. Argos nods vigorously. The thermal differential calculations support relocation. I have charts. Timon holds up a hand, silencing them. His gaze is fixed on Elpis. The feather has spoken. Nike promises victory, but the journey demands extra vigilance against the skyhound's breath. He turns to you. Pterocopus. Your duties escalate. The great shedding has officially begun. And our first battle, he gestures towards the feather, now carefully placed on a small velvet cushion like a holy relic, is against the Sunday. Elpis tucks the crystal lens away. Prepare the nutritional reinforcements, Lysander. The owl needs fortification. This mold just got spicier. Lysander's eyes light up, momentarily forgetting the thermal crisis. The mold elixir. Yes. Time to break out the good stuff. He scurries towards a locked cedar chest in the corner, fumbling with a key. Pericles chooses this moment to cough up another pellet, this one landing with a decisive thunk on the floor near Lyco's feet. It seems remarkably large. Lyco's size. Field rat. Ambitious lad. He scoops it up, adding it to the growing, faintly malodorous collection. Right then. War on Sirius declared. Past the sacred owl's necks, you look from the divine feather on its velvet pillow to the dozing Pericles, blissfully unaware of the celestial thermostat war being waged on his behalf. The countdown wasn't just to the mold, it was a race against the rising heat of the brightest star in the sky. Your job: keep the vessel of divine wisdom cool, well-fed, and ideally, not too grumpy. Easy, right? The declaration of war against Sirius isn't accompanied by trumpets, but by the pungent, slightly fishy aroma of Lysander unlocking the sacred cedar chest. Forget ambrosia, the weapon of choice against celestial heat stress is mold elixir Mk3. Lysander lifts out a series of small, meticulously labeled alabaster jars with the reverence of handling Athena's own jewelry. Right, he mutters, arranging them on a clean slate beside Pericles' perch. Base layer, premium attic la dolmino. He uncorks the first jar, releasing a grassy, peppery scent that makes your mouth water involuntarily. It's the finest extra virgin olive oil, shimmering gold green in the lamplight. Not just any oil, Lysander lectures, pouring a precise measure into a polished bronze mixing bowl. Cold pressed from Coronia key olives harvested under the hunter's moon last autumn. Maximum polyphenols for feather sheath integrity. Argos verified the acidity. Mainstream history drop: the ancient Greeks were obsessed with olive oil, using it for everything from cooking and lighting to athletics and medicine. Its application in sacred animal husbandry logical extension. They recognized its nutritional value and external protective qualities. using specific harvests and moon phases that the temple-grade precision, blurring agronomy, astrology, and devotion. Records from Eleusis mention similar sacred blends for their serpents. Weird little nugget, get this, one key ingredient wasn't food at all. Finely powdered, sun-bleached cuttlebone. Lysander adds a careful spoonful of the chalky white powder to the oil. Calcium carbonate, he explains, stirring vigorously with a silver whisk. For the rachis, the feather shaft makes it strong, like bone. Pericles can't exactly chew on seashells, can he? It's ancient avian dietary supplementation, predating modern poultry science by millennia. The scholarly side-eye, how effective was this elixir? Analysis of residues found in similar temple vessels shows high-quality fats and calcium, so nutritionally, it wasn't nonsense. But the ritual preparation historians clash. Some argue the meticulous sourcing and blending were crucial placebo effects for the priests, channeling their anxiety into structured action. Others point to surprisingly low rates of feather deformities in sacred bird iconography, suggesting maybe, just maybe, the weird recipe worked. The debate, much like the elixir, remains thick. Next comes a jar of viscous, dark amber goo. Thyme honey from Mount High Meadows, Lysander announces. Not just for sweetness. Antimicrobial. Soothing for the crop. Also, he adds conspiratorially, makes the moths stick better. He drizzles a generous stream, stirring the mixture into a glossy, fragrant emulsion. The scent shifts to herbal sweetness. Pericles, roused by the familiar smell, opens one golden eye. Then, the piece de resistance. Lysander pulls out a small, lidded wicker basket. Inside, rustling faintly, live, fat, grain-fed noxious moths. Protein, Lysander states, selecting a particularly plump specimen. The building blocks of keratin. These beauties dined exclusively on sacred barley sprouted in the precinct gardens. No street lamp riffraff here. He deftly dips the squirming moth into the glistening oil honey cuttlebone paste, coating it thoroughly. Pericles' other eye opens. His head swivels with laser focus. Offering one, Lysander intones, presenting the glistening, paste-covered moth on the ivory pick. Pericles' strike is instantaneous and precise. Snick. Gone. A slow, deliberate swallow. The owl's gaze flicks back to the basket. More. You're handed the bowl and whisk. Your turn, Pterocopus, Lysander says, wiping his hands. Consistency is key. Not too runny, not too stiff. Think, divine mayonnaise. Under his watchful eye, you carefully add more oil, honey, and cuttlebone powder, whisking until your wrist aches. The mixture is unpleasantly cool and slick. Dipping the wriggling moths feels intimate and slightly gross. Pericles, however, is in heaven. He dispatches 5 coated moths in rapid succession, each swallow accompanied by a soft, contented click deep in his throat. Now, Lysander says, lowering his voice as Pericles busily cleans his beak on the perch, the real fortification. For serious. He produces a tiny vial of deep red liquid. Pomegranate concentrate. From the sanctuary grove at Eleusis. He adds just 3 drops to the remaining paste, swirling it into a lurid pink hue. Antioxidants. Cooling properties. Also, Hades owes Demeter a favor, so, extra underworldly resilience. Probably. He dips the next moth. Pericles eyes it, head tilted. New color. He hesitates for a split second, then snatches it. Seems Hades' favor tastes acceptable. Elpis approaches with her mortar, now filled with a fine, pale green powder. Crushed dried mint, sage, and a touch of vervain, she murmurs, sprinkling a pinch onto the next paste-dipped moth Lysander prepares. Nerve tonic. To soothe the agitation the heat may bring. Pericles takes this one eagerly. Apparently, divine nerves appreciate herbal support. Feeding frenzy protocol, it's not just what he eats, but how. Timon oversees, ensuring Pericles is offered food only from specific directions favoring the east, Apollo's rising domain, for digestive harmony, and that each coated moth is presented at the exact height of his beak. No stooping. Maintains cervical alignment. Timon barks as you instinctively lower the pick slightly. Pericles glares. You quickly correct. Half an hour later, the sacred elixir bowl is licked clean by Lysander, not Pericles' waste knot. Good for human cuticles too. And Pericles sits on his perch, looking distinctly rounder and supremely satisfied. His crop, the expandable pouch near his breast, bulges slightly. He emits a soft, burbling sound. Owl contentment. Phase 1, internal fortification, complete, Lysander announces, sealing the alabaster jars. Now, Phase 2, external thermal defense. He gestures to Lycos, who hauls in a large, damp-looking bundle of pale linen. Behold! The Mk2 evaporative cooling shade sail system. What follows is a surprisingly complex operation involving wooden poles, clever knots, and a lot of muttered instructions from Argos about maximizing convective airflow vectors. They rigged the linen specially woven to be loosely threaded for breathability over and slightly around Pericles' perch, creating a shaded, tent-like canopy without enclosing him. Lycos then carefully drapes another piece of dampened linen over the top of this canopy. Evaporation, Argos explains, wiping sweat from his brow. Water draws heat as it turns to vapor. Basic thermodynamics. Well, sacred steam principles. Elpis places shallow dishes of water mixed with crushed lavender and rose petals beneath the canopy. Humidity and calm, she states. The chamber begins to smell like a very expensive, slightly damp spa. Pericles, ensconced in his new, cool microclimate, fluffs his feathers appreciatively. He preens a loose down feather from his chest, letting it drift lazily down onto the white linen catcher's cloth, and then tucks his head under his wing, settling in for a post-elixir nap. The war against the dog star's heat has its first fortified position. Lysander surveys the setup with pride, then turns to you, holding out a small, sticky bronze bowl and the whisk. Right. Clean up duty. Every speck of elixir residue must be removed. Ants, Pterococcus. Ants adore sacred owl paste. And Pericles, he nods towards the napping owl, adores eating ants. It's a messy theological loop we prefer to avoid. He hands you a rough linen rag and a jug of vinegar water. Scrub like your sanity depends on it. Because around here, he grins. It just might. You stare at the congealed, pinkish, cuttlefish chalk-streaked mess in the bowl. The scent of thyme, honey and moth legs is persistent. Somewhere above, Sirius blazes, unaware of the damp linen and pomegranate-fueled defiance deep beneath the Acropolis. Your job description now includes divine paste chef, sacred HVAC technician, and anti-ant sanitation engineer. You pick up the rag. The great shedding, it seems, requires getting your hands metaphorically and literally sticky. The damp linen canopy hums with evaporative effort, turning the air around Pericles' perch into a miniature Mediterranean microclimate, cool, faintly floral, and thick with anticipation. You're on high alert, wax tablet balanced precariously on your knee, stylus poised. It's not just about recording when feathers fall anymore, it's about which ones, how they fall, and the immediate aftermath on Pericles' increasingly patchy dignity. The sacred owl looks less like a vessel of divine wisdom and more like a disgruntled, slightly moth-eaten plush toy someone forgot in the attic. Patches of fluffy gray down peek through where sleek contour feathers once lay, and the occasional pin feather tightly wrapped in a waxy blue sheath dots his frame like tiny, hopeful spears. Then, it happens. Not with the dramatic silence of the first primary, but with a soft, almost apologetic pft. A small, barred-covered feather from his left flank detaches, drifts lazily sideways in the gentle currents of your fanning a new duty involving a large palm frond, and lands askew on the sacred white linen catcher's cloth, pointing vaguely southwest. Contamination. Lysander hisses, lunging forward with his bronze tweezers before the feather even settles. It brushed the edge. Southwest vector. Quick, Elpis the implications. Elpis is already there, rock crystal lens deployed. She carefully lifts the feather, examining its base. Clean detachment. Good. She rotates it, frowning at the barbs near the tip. Slight asymmetry, indicative of. She glances at the humidity pots, beads of condensation thick on the clay. Excessive ambient moisture during the late pre-shedding phase, possible weakening of the barbicelle hooks. Timon rumbles, peering over her shoulder. Southwest, that aligns with the direction of Piraeus Harbor. Trade winds disruption to maritime commerce, or, his eyes narrow, a commentary on the quality of the Phoenician purple dye shipment arriving next week. Mainstream history drop. This level of feather-by-feather scrutiny wasn't just superstition. It reflected the Athenian obsession with interpreting divine will through natural phenomena. Every event, from a sneeze to a dropped utensil, could be an omen. For the state's most sacred living symbol, every aspect of its biological process became a divine telegram needing urgent decoding. It was civic risk management via avian dermatology. Weird little nugget, the priests maintained a feather compass rose etched onto a bronze disc beside the catcher's cloth. 8 directional wedges, each associated with a god or concept: North Boreas winds, Northeast Athena wisdom, East Apollo sun, Southeast Demeter harvest, South Notos summer, Southwest Poseidon sea, West Hesperides evening, Northwest Aries strife. The landing direction of every shed feather was plotted, looking for patterns. A cluster pointing northwest. Time for extra sacrifices to Aries. The scholarly side-eye. How much did this real-time feather divination actually influence Athenian policy? Hard proof is elusive. Some historians argue it was purely internal temple theater, a way to manage priestly anxiety. Others cite fragmentary assembly decrees referencing unfavorable avian portents delaying naval expeditions or trade negotiations. Did a wonky-covered feather once postpone a war? Maybe. The line between divine guidance and convenient bureaucratic delay was feathery. Enough omens for one feather. Booms a voice. Lycos shoulders his way in, holding a peculiar tool. It looks like a sculptor's fine loop tool, but crafted from gleaming ivory, its tip rounded and incredibly smooth. The bird's itchy, not prophetic. Look at him. Pericles is indeed contorting his neck, trying to reach a spot between his shoulder blades where a prominent pin feather sheath is starting to crack open, revealing the dark, tightly packed veins beneath. He lets out a low, irritated cluck. Ah, Lysander breathes, momentarily distracted from directional anxieties. The first sheath splitting. Right on schedule for the post-Scorpion's rise, pre-Sirius zenith sweet spot. This calls for the Lyster. He gestures reverently at Lycos' ivory tool. You look puzzled. They, Lister. Lyster, Lycos corrects, pronouncing it Leister. The sacred sheath splitter. Or as I call it, the divine itch reliever. He steps towards Pericles, moving with surprising gentleness. Hold the frond steady, pterocopus. Gentle breeze. Calm him. Pericles eyes the ivory tool with deep suspicion but holds relatively still, perhaps intrigued. Lycos positions the rounded ivory tip beside the splitting sheath, not on it. Rule number 1, he murmurs, his voice losing its usual gruffness. Never, ever force it. You don't split the sheath. You guide it. Like coaxing a shy nymph out of a reed. With feather-light pressure, he uses the smooth ivory to gently stroke the area around the pin feather, following the grain of the emerging barbs. Stimulates blood flow. Encourages the keratin sheath to soften and release naturally. See as he strokes, the crack widens almost imperceptibly, the dark barbs beneath seeming to expand, pushing the waxy sheath further apart. Pericles lets out a soft, shuddering sigh that sounds suspiciously like relief. The forbidden act, Timon leans close to you, his voice a gravelly whisper filled with gravitas. Observe well, pterocopus. This is the heart of our duty. The sheath must come off naturally. To pluck it, to tear it away before its time. He makes a sharp, wrenching gesture. Is to risk damaging the fragile barbs beneath, crippling the feather before it even unfurls. It is sacrilege. It invites weakness, deformity, and the extreme displeasure of an owl with impaired flight capability. He shudders. A grounded sacred owl unthinkable. The city would panic. The assembly would dissolve into chaos. Do not pluck. Lycos continues his meticulous, almost meditative stroking. After several minutes, a tiny, translucent fragment of waxy sheath flakes away. Then another. The pin feather beneath is now clearly visible, a tightly furled, dark gray spear point. There, Lycos murmurs. Nature takes its course. We just nudge. He steps back, polishing the Leister on his tunic. Pericles immediately reaches back with his beak and gives the spot a vigorous, satisfying scratch. Progress. The rest of your shift becomes a master class in controlled feather liberation. You witness the down drift, tiny, fluffy down feathers detaching like thistledown, requiring no intervention, just careful collection. They were used to stuff sacred amulets, apparently. The contour conundrum, larger body feathers shedding cleanly, their direction meticulously plotted on the bronze compass rose a cluster east. Apollo smiles. The pin feather parade, Lycos, and soon you under his exacting supervision, wielding the Leister on emerging pin feathers across Pericles' back and wings. You learn the pressure, barely a whisper. You feel the subtle difference between a sheath ready to release and one needing more time. Pericles tolerates you with regal disdain, punctuated by soft clicks of what might be approval, or indigestion. The shedding symphony, the chamber fills with soft sounds, the pt of shedding feathers, the delicate crickle of breaking sheaths, the rhythmic shhhk of Pericles preening newly exposed feathers, and the constant, low hum of the evaporative canopy. It's oddly peaceful, a ritual ballet of renewal under the watchful eyes of gods, stars, and priests armed with ivory tools and rock crystal lenses. As your shift ends, Lysander surveys the growing collection of plotted feathers and the slightly less irritable owl. Shedding rate, optimal. Sheath release, 92% natural, 8% assisted. Serious impact, mitigated, for now. He sounds like a battlefield commander reporting a successful skirmish. He hands you a soft brush made of ibis down feathers and a shallow bronze tray. Final duty, the Pericles pat down. Gently. Check for any loose sheaths we missed. very gently. Remember rule number 1. You approach the sacred owl. He eyes the brush. You take a slow breath, channeling Lyco's calm. You begin to lightly, so lightly, brush over his back, feeling for any rough spots or stubborn sheaths. Pericles fluffs slightly but remains still. Under your touch, beneath the emerging stubble of new feathers, you feel the solid warmth of the living vessel, the steady beat of a tiny, fierce heart carrying the weight of a city's hopes. You find one last, tiny sheath fragment near his tail. You don't pluck. You reach for the leister, the ivory cool in your hand. Just a nudge. Just a guide. Pericles shuffles his talons, a soft quack escaping him. You choose to believe it's a thank you. Or maybe it's just owl for finally, someone who gets it. The sacred dust bunnies have barely settled from the great scouring when a new sensation assaults you, cold, smooth ivory pressed urgently into your palm. Lyco stands before you, holding out an object of startling beauty and latent peril, the ceremonial ctice. It's not a comb in the modern sense. Imagine a sculptor's finishing tool crossed with a miniature harp. Its handle is thick, polished hippopotamus ivory, worn smooth by generations of anxious palms. From this handle fan out 12 long, needle-fine tines, also ivory, each tapering to a point so sharp it looks like it could pierce moonlight. They're spaced just wide enough to slide between feather barbs, yet strong enough not to snap under the pressure of a divine tantrum. Your graduation present, Pterocopus? Lycos grins, though his eyes hold a distinct good luck, you'll need it glint. The sacred untangler. Pericles' preening gear just got an upgrade. Try not to stab yourself. Or him. Mostly him. Mainstream history drop. Ivory grooming tools weren't uncommon in elite ancient societies. Egyptian nobility loved ivory hair combs, but this level of specialization for a bird piqued Athenian sacral eccentricity. The ctice represented a significant investment, ivory sourced from Nubia via complex trade routes, carved by master artisans likely sworn to secrecy. Its existence underscores the immense value placed on the owl's physical perfection. A matted feather wasn't just unsightly, it was a theological snag. Weird little nugget, the ctice wasn't used dry. Before each grooming session, its tines were dipped in a sacred emollient blend stored in a tiny carved sardonyx jar. The blend primarily cold-pressed sesame oil for glide and feather sheen, infused with a minute amount of spider silk solution, yes, dissolved spider webs collected at dawn. Why the priests believed spider silk's legendary strength imparted resilience to the feather barbs. It also made the oil slightly tacky, helping the tines grip debris without pulling. Ancient biomimicry meets ritual goo. The scholarly side-eye. How often did these sacred groomings go wrong? Temple records are predictably silent on accidental owl stabbings. However, forensic analysis of some recovered ctice tools shows microscopic chipping and repair marks on the tines. Were these from hitting stubborn seed husks, or, owl bone? Did a clumsy Pterocopus ever provoke a divine pecking? The lack of written incidents suggests either impeccable training, excellent owl temperaments unlikely, or a very efficient cover-up protocol. The mystery itches like a pin feather. Timon looms, his expression suggesting you're about to defuse an Athenian trireme's anchor. The ctice is not a toy, Pterocopus. It is a scalpel for the soul, or at least, for the feather coat. One slip, one snag, one tug. He mimes a catastrophic feather pull, wincing. And you compromise the integrity of Athena's gaze upon the agora. Also, he adds grimly, Pericles bites hard. He gestures towards the perch. Pericles is looking particularly fluffy and disheveled after his post-scour nap, a small clump of down feathers stuck comically above one eye like a tiny, grumpy eyebrow. A prime candidate for divine detangling. Lycos guides you. First, the oil. Just the tips. He demonstrates, dipping the very ends of the cacti tines into the glistening spider silk oil. The scent is nutty and faintly dusty. Too much, and he'll look like he fell in a fryer. Too little, and you'll snag. Like this. He positions himself beside Pericles, who eyes the cacti with resigned suspicion. Start from the base of the feather shaft, always. Follow the grain, like water flowing downhill. Lycos' hand moves with hypnotic slowness and precision. He inserts the tip of one tine between two barbs near the rachis of a slightly ruffled secondary feather on Pericles' back. With a motion so gentle it's barely perceptible, he glides the tine down the length of the feather, following the natural curve. A tiny fleck of dust and a microscopic seed husk cling to the oiled tip. The feather settles back into perfect alignment, its barbs zipping together seamlessly. Pericles lets out a soft prrp. See, not brain surgery. Just feather diplomacy, Lycos mutters. Your turn. That fluffy monstrosity on his head. The eyebrow of doom. Start there. Easy target. Mostly. You approach, the cacti feeling suddenly heavy and treacherous in your hand. Pericles swivels his head, fixing you with that golden stare. You. With the pointy thing. I'm watching. You dip the tines, just the tips, into the sacred oil. The scent of sesame and ancient dust fills your nostrils. You reach slowly towards the rogue fluff clump above his eye. Pericles doesn't flinch, but his pupils contract slightly. Focus. Mimicking Lycos, you aim for the base of the clump, near the skin. The ivory tine feels impossibly delicate. You slide it gently under the tangle, lifting slightly. The down is incredibly fine, like cobwebs spun from smoke. You feel a slight resistance. Don't pull. Glide. You angle the cacti, following the direction the feathers want to go. Slowly, painstakingly, the clump begins to loosen. A tiny puff of down floats free. You use another tine to gently tease apart the remaining strands, guiding them back into place with the oiled ivory. It's maddeningly slow. Your hand cramps. Pericles blinks. Slowly. The perils of the job. Just as you smooth the last strand, Pericles decides to vigorously shake his head. Your cacti tine, still near his head, catches snag. On the very edge of a newly emerged pin feather sheath. Pericles lets out a startled, indignant squeak. And lunges sideways on his perch, wings half flaring. Your heart stops. Timon gasps. Lysander drops a clay pot thankfully empty. Lycos is instantly there, a hand hovering near Pericles but not touching. Whoa, big fella. Easy. Just a love tap. Pterocopus. Breathe. Did the sheath break? Look, you peer, terrified. The pin feather sheath is intact. Just a tiny, superficial scratch on the waxy surface. No barbs exposed. Pericles glares at you, fluffing himself up to twice his size, radiating offense. He looks like an affronted, spiky gray cloud. Minor breach of protocol. No divine wrath incurred, this time, Timon rumbles, letting out a breath you didn't know he was holding. But note the reaction. Agitation. Stress hormones. Detrimental to keratin deposition. Precision, pterocopus. Feathers are not Athenian bureaucracy, they cannot be bludgeoned into order. Lycos takes the cacti from your trembling hand. Lesson learned. Never linger near the pin feathers. They're sensitive. And he's a drama queen. He offers Pericles a plain, uncoated moth as a peace offering. The owl snatches it, still eyeing you balefully. The grooming grind, the rest of your shift is a master class in controlled terror and meticulous care. You tackle less sensitive areas, smoothing contour feathers on his back, carefully untangling a tiny knot near his tail caused by enthusiastic preening, gently removing a nearly invisible thread caught on a leg feather. Each successful pass with the dice builds a sliver of confidence. The oil helps, the ivory glides, and Pericles gradually depuffs, accepting your ministrations with grudging tolerance. The rhythmic shhhk of the dice through his plumage joins the chamber's symphony, a sound of order being restored, one feather at a time. As you finish the last pass on his right wing, Pericles stretches luxuriously, his feathers now sleek and aligned, the eyebrow of doom vanquished. He even lets out a soft, burbling sound that might be owl purring. Lycos claps you on the shoulder, making you jump. See feather diplomacy. You didn't get fired. Or pecked to shreds. A good day. He takes the dice, carefully wiping each tine clean with a soft linen cloth before placing it back in its lined cedar box. Just wait till you meet the real diva tomorrow. You look up, confused. Real diva? Lycos nods towards the evaporative canopy. The Mk3 cooling system. Needs its beauty sleep adjusted. Argos says the evaporation rate is off by 0.3%. Cue the celestial tantrum. He rolls his eyes. Turns out keeping a goddess owl cool is only slightly less complicated than appeasing the god herself. Grab a broom. We have sacred condensation puddles to mop. The glamour never ends. You glance at Pericles, now meticulously cleaning a talon, looking sleek and utterly superior. You pick up the broom. Feather diplomat, condensation wrangler, and survivor of the dice initiation. The job description keeps growing, much like the pile of sacred dust in the corner. The rhythmic shhhk of the sacred dice fades, replaced by a new, ominous sound. Pericles sneezes. It's not a delicate achoo. It's a full-bodied, feather-ruffling kershoo. That sends a miniature blizzard of down and dust motes swirling through the damp, oil-scented air beneath the evaporative canopy. Pericles shakes his head violently, glaring at the offending particles with profound indignation. Lysander freezes, a freshly oiled moth halfway to the offering pick. Timon's storm cloud beard bristles. Elpis drops her crystal lens with a tiny clink. Code Grey, Lycos mutters, already snatching a coarse hemp broom from the shadows. The dust uprising. Initiate protocol, sacred scour. You stare. Code Grey. The enemy, Lycos declares, jabbing his broom towards the glittering motes dancing in a sunbeam shafting through a ventilation slit high on the wall. Dust. Feather debris. Moth scale shrapnel. The arch-nemesis of new-growth keratin. He thrusts another broom, this one with softer goat hair bristles, into your hands. Welcome to the clean room crusade, Pterocopus. Leave no mote behind. Mainstream history drop. While we imagine ancient temples as perpetually grimy, the Greeks, especially for sacred spaces and delicate tasks like textile work or medicine, were fastidious cleaners. The Erechtheian's inner sanctums wouldn't win a modern ISO rating, but this level of targeted, obsessive dust control for an owl's mold unprecedented. It highlights their understanding of environmental threats. They knew foreign particles could irritate skin, clog pores, and potentially hinder feather growth, even if they framed it as warding off malevolent miasmas. Weird little nugget, the dust wasn't just swept away. Collected owl dander was considered a potent divinatory medium. Lycos sweeps the initial blizzard into a special bronze pan with a fine mesh bottom. Elpis carefully sifts the contents. See, she points to a tiny, curled grey flake. Pericles dander, shaped like a miniature amphora. A sign of prosperous trade voyages. Another flake resembles a tiny spear tip. Aries stirs, but only mildly. Probably just that argument over olive press rentals in the Agora yesterday. They logged these micro-omens on a special dust tablet. It was like reading divine tea leaves, made of owl skin. The scholarly side-eye, how effective was this ancient clean room microscopic analysis of sediment layers in similar temple crypts reveals, a lot of dust. Historians are divided, was the meticulous sweeping a genuine, effective hygiene measure, or purely symbolic ritual performance? The discovery of pollen grains and textile fibers deep within votive owl statues suggests dust did get everywhere. Perhaps the frantic cleaning was less about absolute purity and more about channeling priestly anxiety into visible action, a sacred placebo effect with brooms. The cleaning operation is military in its precision. The evac. Pericles is temporarily relocated amid much protesting crucking to a smaller, stone alcove draped with freshly dampened linen. Argos monitors him with a humidity pot clutched like a talisman. The pre-soak, Lycos mists the entire perch area and stone floor beneath the canopy with a solution of water and vinegar, dissolves greasy residues. Repels ants. Smells like victory. The heavy assault. You attack the stone floor and lower walls with the coarse hemp broom, dislodging packed debris, old moth legs, and the ghosts of sacrificed lentils. Dust bunnies of epic, sacred proportions meet their doom. The fine-tuning, Elpis follows with a damp linen rag, wiping every surface within wingspan: the perch, the stone pedestal, the edges of the feather catcher cloth stand. Her movements are methodical, a meditation in grime removal. The air purification, Lysander burns a specific cleansing incense, dried rosemary, sage, and pine resin on a small brazier, the sharp, clean smoke designed to purify the aerial currents. He waves a palm frond to distribute it. Banishes stagnant energies and airborne fluff. The forbidden zone, Timon stands guard over the most critical area, the pin feather perimeter. Around each emerging pin feather on Pericles' body, now numbering in the dozens, like tiny blue-gray quills, Timon marks an invisible, sacred radius with his gaze. No broom. No cloth. No breath too close. He booms as Lycos sweeps near. Disturb the sheath, disrupt the growth. A deformed flight feather is a dagger pointed at the heart of Athens. You sweep in wide, cautious arcs, giving the pin feathers a berth worthy of a trireme navigating rocks. Halfway through, disaster strikes. Literally. You're sweeping near the ancient stone table holding the astrolabe and star charts when your broom handle knocks a small, forgotten clay cup. It tips, spilling a dark, viscous liquid, yesterday's discarded pomegranate concentrate, directly onto the sacred feather compass rose bronze disc. Time stops. The liquid pools, obscuring the engraved directions: southwest, Poseidon drowned in lurid red. Lysander lets out a strangled cry. The compass. Defiled. Poseidon's wrath. Maritime disasters. Salted fields. He lunges for rags. Elpis, however, peers closer, her diviner's eye seeing past the panic. Wait. She points. The pomegranate juice, thick and syrupy, has flowed primarily into the southwest wedge, but a thin rivulet has snaked precisely along the engraved line pointing northwest. To Ares. Look. Poseidon inundated, yes, but Ares, stained. Timon pales. Ares stained. Conflict fueled by, spilled fruit, a maritime war triggered by, a dockside tavern brawl over sour wine. The possibilities for civic catastrophe unfold in his horrified expression. Lycos, ever practical, mops furiously. It's juice, boss. Sticky, annoying juice. Not an omen. A mess. He scrubs the disc. The pomegranate stain proves tenacious, leaving a faint pink tinge on Poseidon's sea and a darker smudge near Ares' spear. There. Clean-ish. Mostly. Poseidon might be miffed about the pink, but Ares he probably likes the look. More menacing. The cleaning resumes, now tinged with nervous energy. You finish the final wipe down. The stone gleams dully. The air smells of vinegar, pine smoke, and damp linen. Pericles is returned to his pristine domain. He steps onto his perch, gives his feathers a thorough shake, dislodging exactly 3 new down flakes, all landing harmlessly on the catcher cloth, and lets out a soft, contented whoo. The dust war is won. Argos rushes to his hygrometer pots. Humidity stabilized. Particulate count. He squints at the water's surface, now clear of floating debris, significantly reduced. The microclimate is secured. Sirius trembles. Lysander surveys the gleaming chamber, hands on hips. Operation Sacred Scour, success. Dust levels, suppressed. Owl dander omens, logged. Pomegranate-based geopolitical crises, averted. Mostly. He eyes the faintly pink compass rose. Now, who's ready for the real nightmare? You brace yourself. The Mk3 cooling system adjustments. Lycos grins, holding up a complex-looking tangle of knotted linen cords and wooden pulleys. Worse. Recalibrating the tension on the evaporative shade sails. Argos says 0.3% variance in sag equals 0.1% loss in cooling efficiency. Pericles detects 0.1%. He LOL give us the silent treatment for days. He tosses you a knot. Start untangling, feather diplomat. The glamour, it's damp, it's naughty, and it smells vaguely of sacred vinegar. Sweet dreams. You pick up the linen cord. Somewhere above, the real star's wheel. Down here, you wage war against dust, tension percentages, and the mercurial comfort of a tiny, feathered god. The molting continues. The scent of sacred vinegar fades, replaced by something new, the electric crackle of anticipation. Pericles stands tall on his olive branch perch, no longer a patchwork of fluff and quills. A sleek, silent intensity radiates from him. His new feathers dark gray, barred with subtle cream, lie flat and perfect, aligned like the hoplites of Athena's own guard. He stretches one wing, then the other, with slow, deliberate power. The veins catch the lamplight, shimmering with latent energy. The soft shfft sound they make isn't just friction, it's the whisper of potential flight. Lysander watches, his usual sarcasm replaced by quiet awe. Behold the feathered phalanx, he murmurs. Locked, loaded, and ready for, well, hopefully not crashing into the caryatids. Lycos shoves a fresh wax tablet and stylus into your hands. This one has different symbols pre-etched, a wingtip, an arrow pointing up, down, sideways, a wobbly line, and a tiny owl-shaped splat. The flight log, he announces grimly. Your new best friend. Or worst enemy. Depends on how gracefully his fluffiness remembers how gravity works. Mainstream history drop. The Athenians weren't just concerned with the owl looking perfect, its function as Athena's vigilant scout was paramount. Flight tests weren't mere zoology, they were sacred quality control. A grounded owl symbolized crippled wisdom, impaired vigilance, a terrifying omen for a maritime power reliant on swift ships and sharp eyes. Ensuring Pericles could still hunt, patrol, and evade predators sacred or otherwise was non-negotiable state security. Weird little nugget, the test flights weren't conducted in silence. Specific hymns were chanted, tailored to different flight maneuvers. A low, rhythmic drone for steady gliding invoking Boreas, the north wind, for stability. A sharp, staccato burst for rapid ascent calling on Nike, Victory, for lift. A mournful, descending scale for controlled landing appealing to Gaia, the earth, for a soft reception. It was avian aerodynamics meets divine playlist. The scholarly side-eye, how controlled were these temple test flights? Reconstructions based on descriptions suggest the flight chamber was likely a long, high-ceilinged crypt or disused storeroom, minimally furnished and draped with nets just in case. But was it truly sufficient for assessing open-air capability? Historians suspect the real test came later, during supervised nocturnal outings on the Acropolis slopes, events conveniently omitted from official temple logs to avoid panic if things went owlishly. The truth remains tantalizingly out of reach, much like a spooked mouse. Timon clears his throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. Initiate phase, pterodicamasia. Feather scrutiny. He steps forward, holding not the rock crystal lens, but a shallow, wide bronze bowl filled to the brim with crystal clear water. The hydrostatic integrity test, observe. With infinite care, he plucks a single, newly grown secondary flight feather from a small collection of recent, non-omen-bearing sheds. He holds it horizontally just above the water's surface, then releases it. The feather doesn't float. It doesn't plummet. It spins slowly, gracefully, as it sinks, like a sycamore seed falling in autumn. It settles on the bottom, resting perfectly flat. Timon nods. Sound. No hidden fractures. No warping. The barbs shed water evenly. Hydrostatically sound. He repeats the test with a tail feather. Same graceful spin, same perfect landing. A collective sigh of relief. Elpis steps up next, wielding her magnifying lens and a small bronze probe thinner than a hair. Microbarb inspection. She selects a primary feather, the long, powerful one from the wingtip. Under the lens, the world explodes into intricate detail. Thousands of tiny barbs branch off the central shaft, each barb lined with even tinier hooks, barbules. The ziplock of the avian world, Lysander whispers. Elpis gently uses the probe to test the hook engagement between adjacent barbs. A perfect, seamless zip. She tests another section. Seamless. She moves down the feather, closer to the base where the barbs are finer. The probe hesitates. A tiny snag. Here, she murmurs. A micron misalignment. Likely from. She glances pointedly at the faint pink stain still marring the Aries section of the compass disc. Residual atmospheric tension. Or spilled pomegranate. She carefully uses the probe to realign the barbules. The zip is restored. Mitigated. But noted in the log, minor barbulic dissonance, sector 7 alpha. Monitor during flight stress. The moment of truth, Pericles is growing visibly impatient, shifting his weight from talon to talon, his head bobbing. Timon gives the nod. Lysander and Lycos move to opposite ends of the longest clear stretch of the chamber, about 15 feet. Lysander holds a simple wooden perch. Lycos holds a fat, juicy mouse, dangling by its tail from a long pair of bronze tongs. The mouse wriggles pathetically. Pericles locks onto it like a feathered missile. His pupils dilate. Test flight alpha, Timon intones. Objective: sustained glide. Him: Boreas embrace. Initiate. Elpis begins a low, resonant hum, deep in her chest, mimicking the steady wind. Lycos swings the mouse gently. Pericles crouches, muscles coiling beneath sleek feathers. You hold your breath, stylus poised over the flight log. Whoosh. It's shockingly fast, shockingly silent. Pericles launches from his perch, wings snapping out to their full, impressive span. For 3 glorious heartbeats, his pure, silent grace, gliding perfectly level across the chamber towards the dangling mouse. The Boreas hymn thrums. You instinctively sketch the wingtip symbol and an arrow straight line on the tablet. Perfect. Then, disaster, as he nears Lycos, a downdraft, or perhaps just an awkward air current from the still damp linen canopy catches his left wing. Or maybe the minor barbulic dissonance in Sector 7 Alpha chose this exact moment to rebel. Pericles tilts sharply. His glide path wobbles. The arrow straight line in your mind becomes the wobbly line symbol etched hastily onto wax. He flaps once, hard, trying to correct. His right wingtip clips the edge of a stone offering table. Thwack. Pericles lets out a squawk of outrage, tumbling sideways in a whirl of feathers. He hits the stone floor with an undignified flump, skidding a few inches before coming to rest on his side, wings askew. The mouse, forgotten, scrambles frantically up Lycos' arm before vanishing into a shadowed crack in the wall. The Boreas hymn cuts off mid-note. Silence crashes down, thick and heavy. Lycos stares, tongs dangling empty. Lysander drops the perch. Timon looks like he's about to invoke every wrathful god in the pantheon. Elpis gasps. You stare at the tiny owl splat symbol on your tablet. It seems horrifically apartment. Pericles lies still for a terrifying second. Then, slowly, indignantly, he pushes himself upright. He shakes himself vigorously, sending a cloud of dust motes where did they come from swirling. He fixes the entire room with a glare of pure, molten indignation. This was your fault. Lysander is the first to move, rushing forward but stopping short of touching the sacred bird. Pericles. Status report. Any pain, feather damage, pride, understandably bruised. Timon storms over, peering at the wingtip that hit the table. The impact point. Inspect immediately. Elpis is already there, lens deployed, probing the feathers with her hair-thin tool. Pericles tolerates it, radiating wounded dignity. No structural damage, Elpis reports after a tense minute. A slight scuff mark on the primary covert. Barbules ruffled. Reparable. She begins the meticulous process of smoothing the ruffled barbs with her fingers and the sacred ctice oil. Pericles shudders but holds still. Lycos cautiously approaches the spot where Pericles landed. He crouches, examining the stone floor. Hold the lamp, he mutters. You do. He points. There, on the cool stone, is a small, wet patch. Owl vomit, Lycos states matter-of-factly. Post-impact regurgitation. Mouse, partially processed. The silver lining or the regurgitated one, Elpis pauses her feather repair. The pellet. Retrieve it. Untouched by earth. Lycos scoops the warm, compact mass of fur and tiny bones onto a bronze tray with his tongs. Elpis examines it under the lens, her earlier tension replaced by scholarly curiosity. Ah, see the patterning of the vertebrae, the specific molars. This was no common field mouse. Mus musculus domesticus. A house mouse. Rare in the temple precincts. She looks up, her eyes wide. He hunted within the sacred confines. A sign of him being disoriented after crashing, Lysander offers weakly. Of heightened divine vigilance. Timon booms, seizing the narrative. Even in distress, the owl-eyed one's servant patrols. He detected an intruder. This pellet, he gestures dramatically at the regurgitated offering, is not failure. It is proof of unbroken instinct. A most favorable omen. Pericles, now fully upright and having his scuffed covered meticulously groomed by Elpis, lets out a soft hoo. It sounds suspiciously like smug vindication. The crash was inconvenient. The mouse was delicious. And the pellet divine PR gold. Lysander looks from the owl splat on your log to the sacred pellet on the tray. He sighs, running a hand through his hair. Right. So. Flight test alpha, glide stability failed. Target acquisition failed. Pellet production exemplary. Emergency landing. He glances at Pericles, now looking annoyingly pleased with himself. Survived. With bonus omens. He turns to you. Log it all, Pterocopus. The glory, the splat, and the holy puke. Tomorrow, we try again. With more hymns. Less furniture. And maybe, a dumber mouse. You stare at the tablet, the stylus trembling slightly. Wingtip symbol. Wobbly line. Owl splat. And now, a tiny pellet doodle in the margin. The path to airborne divinity, it seems, is paved with unexpected vomit and very specific omens. Pericles ruffles his newly repaired feathers. Onwards. Upwards. Hopefully. The faint, greasy scent of sacred owl vomit still lingers, a pungent counterpoint to the damp linen and herbal oils. Pericles, perched once more with improbable dignity, radiates an aura of injured pride mixed with profound skepticism. His scuffed covered feather has been meticulously realigned by Elpis, but the memory of the stone floor meeting his dignity is clearly fresh. Lysander stares at your flight log tablet, its wobbly line and owl splat symbols seeming to mock him. He sighs, a sound like sand escaping an hourglass. Right. Back to basics. Before we conquer the furniture, we conquer the night. Pericles, he declares, turning to the owl, it's time to remind you who you are. Athena Noctua. Lady of the moonlit hunt. Dust off those instincts. Mainstream history drop. Owls were synonymous with Athenian identity coins, shields, statues. But their actual nocturnal hunting prowess was crucial to the sacred owl's symbolic power. It wasn't just wisdom, it was vigilance in darkness, the ability to strike unseen. Reconnecting Pericles with his wild roots wasn't just training, it was reaffirming the core mythos of Athena's protective gaze over the sleeping city. A sacred owl that couldn't hunt was a broken symbol. Weird little nugget, the training involved sacrificial moths marked with luminescent lichen paste. Lysander and Lycos collected specific night-flying moths, daubed a tiny spot on their wings with a paste made from crushed Xanthoria peritina, a common sunburst lichen that faintly glows under moonlight, and released them in the training area. Tracking Pericles' success rate with these celestial targets was believed to gauge his connection to Selene's the moon's favor. Missed a glowing moth. Lunar disfavor detected. The scholarly side-eye, how much actual hunting did the sacred owl do? Evidence is murky. Some historians argue it was largely ceremonial, fed temple moths and mice. Others point to pellet contents found near the Erectheon containing wild bat bones and rare beetle carapaces, suggesting genuine nocturnal forays. Was Pericles slipping out a priest-vetted window for moonlit snacks, or were wild prey items discreetly added to his diet? The truth, like an owl's flight, is silent and unseen. You emerge from the temple's secret northern entrance not long before true dark, a disused postern gate shrouded in ivy. The air is cooler now, smelling of thyme, pine resin, and distant sea salt. The sprawling city of Athens stretches below, a tapestry of flickering oil lamps and deepening shadows. Above, the vast attic sky is deepening from sapphire to indigo, the first defiant stars pricking through. Pericles, perched on a thick leather gauntlet specially fitted over Lycos' forearm, feels different out here. His posture is taller, alert, his head swiveling constantly, those enormous golden eyes drinking in the twilight. The indignation of the crash is replaced by a sharp, primal focus. This is his domain, phase beta, lunar recalibration, Lysander whispers, his usual sarcasm muted by the encroaching dark. He gestures to a relatively open area on the Acropolis' north slope, terraced bedrock dotted with ancient olive trees and low shrubs, safely away from cliffs or tourist routes. Not that there are any tourists at this hour, just a lone shepherd's distant fire on high meadows. Objective: low-level navigation and target acquisition under moonlight. No furniture. Minimal hymns. Maximum owl. Lycos lowers his arm. Pericles tenses, then launches himself onto a low, gnarled olive branch. He blends instantly, a shadow among shadows. Only the faint gleam of his eyes gives him away. Lysander hands you a small, hooded lantern with a single slit casting a thin beam, not much wider than your hand. You're the moon, Pterocopus. Sort of. Aim that beam where I point. Gently. We don't want to blind the divine depth perception. Lycos, moving with surprising stealth for a man who usually clatters, positions himself near a patch of scrubby sage. He produces a small wicker cage. Inside, moths. He selects one, dips a tiny brush into a jar of faintly glowing greenish paste, dabs its wings, and releases it. The moth flutters erratically, a confused, bioluminescent spark in the gloom. Target 1, Agrotus Ypsilon. The Ypsilon dart. Glowing. Go. Pericles' head snaps towards the erratic green spark. He crouches, a coiled spring of feathers and focus. You aim the lantern beam, following Lysander's hissed directions, left, steady, now. The beam illuminates the moth just as it flutters past a pale limestone boulder. Pericles drops like a silent stone. Snick. The glow vanishes. Pericles remounts his olive branch, swallowing. A soft click in his throat. Success tastes good. The unseen hurdle, it's not just catching. It's navigation. Lysander directs you to illuminate paths between trees, over low outcrops, demanding silent glides and precise turns. Pericles, initially hesitant after his crash, gains confidence with each successful moth intercept. He weaves through the olive branches, wings barely whispering, using the lantern beam like a runway light. But the real test comes when Lysander points to a narrow gap between two tall cypress trees, their branches intertwined. Illumine the gap. Low and steady. You aim the beam. Pericles locks on, launches, and at the last second, flares his wings, braking hard. He lands clumsily on a lower cypress branch instead of gliding through. He shuffles his talons, looking annoyed. Height misjudgment, Argos mutters from the shadows where he's monitoring a water clock. Lunar parallax error compounded by unfamiliar arboreal density. Or, he squints at Pericles, lingering distrust of tight spaces after the table incident. Lysander approaches the cypresses. Right. Lesson 2, Trusting the Void. He points upwards. See Selene half full. Strong light, Your shadow. He gestures to Pericles' distorted owl shape thrown onto the limestone by the moon. When your shadow shrinks beneath you on the approach, you're too high. When it stretches long ahead, you're too low. Aim for the shadow to be just forming under your talons as you pass through the gap. The moon is your altimeter, Pericles. Pericles stares at Lysander, then at his own moon shadow, then at the gap. It's a lot of astrophysics for an owl. He shuffles again. Lycos releases another glowing moth, this one darting through the cypress gap. Pericles watches it, head tilted. Hunger warring with caution. The glowing moth loops back, tauntingly close to the gap. Light the void, Pterocopus, Lysander whispers. You steady the lantern beam squarely in the gap between the trees. Pericles tenses. He looks at the beam, at his shadow, at the fluttering green spark. He launches. He doesn't glide low this time. He flies at the gap, wings pumping once, hard. As he reaches the opening, his shadow is a compact, dark puddle directly beneath him on the moonlit rock. He tucks his wings slightly, streams through the gap like a gray arrow, snaps them out on the other side, and snatches the moth midair in a single, fluid motion. Snick-click. He lands on a boulder beyond, triumphant. No flare. No hesitation. Pure, silent, moonlit precision. Lysander lets out a low whistle. Now that's the owl-eyed one's postman. Elpis, watching from near the temple wall, smiles faintly. Selene favors boldness. The unscripted element, just as Lysander prepares to release the next moth, a sound floats up from the city below, a clear, sweet, slightly melancholic melody played on a lyra. Someone in the Kerameikos district is serenading the moon. Pericles' head swivels instantly towards the sound, his attention utterly diverted from moth hunting. He lets out a soft, inquisitive queek. Lycos groans. Ah, the lyre player of Kerameikos. Strikes again. Every third night, like clockwork. Ruins the sacred focus. But Lysander watches Pericles, intrigued. The owl isn't alarmed, he's listening, head tilted, utterly absorbed. Fascinating, Lysander murmurs. Auditory distraction vector. Unplanned variable. He jots a note on his own wax tablet. Log it, Pterocopus. Subject exhibits marked auditory sensitivity to Aeolian mode melodies in D minor. Potential operational vulnerability or undisclosed appreciation for night music. Pericles ignores the scientific notation. He swivels his head back towards the training ground as Lycos releases another glowing moth. The lyre music continues, a haunting thread weaving through the night. Pericles drops from the boulder, glides silently towards the new target, but his trajectory has a slight, almost imperceptible curve, towards the direction of the music. He catches the moth, but the glide was distracted. Lyrical, perhaps, but distracted. Lysander sighs, but it's a good-natured sigh this time. All right, maestro, enough celestial aerobatics for one night. Let us get his lunar luminescence back before he develops a taste for epic poetry. He gestures for you to douse the lantern. The moon alone illuminates the path back to the secret gate. Pericles, back on Lycos' gauntlet, gazes out over the lamp-lit city, the lyre's faint melody still drifting on the cool air. His feathers are cool, sleek, unruffled. The stone floor is forgotten. The night, the hunt, the music, this is his inheritance. The great shedding isn't just about feathers, it's about remembering how to own the darkness. As you slip back into the temple's earthy silence, Lysander claps you on the shoulder. progress. Not perfect, but progress. He remembered the sky doesn't bite. Mostly. He glances back towards the city. Tomorrow night, we introduce wind. And maybe earplugs for the Karameko's serenade. One celestial crisis at a time. You follow, the scent of night blooming jasmine clinging to your tunic. The log will show a distracted glide. But the memory a silent owl arrowing through moonlight, the distant lyre a reminder that even divine vigilance pauses sometimes, just to listen. The scent of night jasmine clinging to your tunic fades, swallowed by the temple's familiar embrace of damp stone, lamp oil, and the faint, dusty musk of sacred owl. But the air inside feels different after the moonlit slopes. Thicker. Charged. Pericles, back on his olive branch perch beneath the humming evaporative canopy, radiates a quiet confidence. His feathers, sleek and shadow-dark in the lamplight, seem to hold the memory of silent glides and snatched moths. The indignity of the stone floor feels distant, replaced by the primal thrum of the hunt reclaimed. Yet, a new tension thrums beneath the surface, the silent countdown to the most perilous flight test yet, the caryatid gauntlet. Lysander unrolls a papyrus map of the Erecthean's upper levels onto the stone table, its corners weighted down by polished hematite stones shaped like owls. Target, the porch of the maidens, he announces, tapping the drawing of the iconic porch where 6 towering stone caryatids held the roof aloft with serene, impossible strength. Objective, full circuit navigation within the colonnade. No collisions. Minimal wing flapping. Maximum divine elegance. Mainstream history drop, this wasn't just an agility test, it was theological theater. The caryatids weren't mere columns, they were representations of the captive women of Carii, eternally bearing the weight of Athenian victory. Having Athena's owl weave effortlessly between them symbolized wisdom navigating the burdens of empire, vigilance threading through the pillars of state. A crash here wouldn't just bruise an owl, it would bruise the civic mythos. Weird little nugget, to minimize risk, the priests employed sacred dust markers. Hours before the flight, Lycos would use a hollow reed to blow incredibly fine, iridescent powder made from crushed abalone shell onto the caryatid's outstretched arms and drapery folds. Wherever Pericles' wingtips brushed the stone, the powder would momentarily shimmer, revealing his clearance or lack thereof like divine glitter. It was ancient owl flight data recording. The scholarly side-eye, did they really risk the sacred owl flying amidst priceless 5th century BC sculptures? Probably not during public hours. Historians suspect these tests occurred deep in the pre-dawn gloom, with the Erecthean precinct sealed by temple guards bribed with extra rations. The porch might even refer to a scaled-down model set up in a larger crypt chamber, though temple records vaguely mention nocturnal rites upon the holy porch. The line between reality and sacred reenactment remains blurred. The preparation is intense. Pericles is subjected to an extra session with the ctice, every feather aligned to aerodynamic perfection. Elpis anoints his wing joints with a cooling salve of aloe vera and crushed cucumber for supple articulation under celestial pressure. Argos measures the pre-dawn air density using a complex water displacement apparatus involving a clay pot, a bronze bowl, and several muttered curses about Archimedes' ghost. Timon stands before Pericles, delivering a stern pep talk disguised as a hymn to Athena Nike. Let your wings be the whisper of victory, not the crash of folly, Timon intones, fixing the owl with his stormiest gaze. Let the maidens feel only the breeze of your passing, not the shame of your impact. Fly true, vessel of wisdom. Or. He pauses dramatically, no extra moths tomorrow. Pericles stares back, unblinking. Challenge accepted. Moths non-negotiable. You emerge onto the Erecthean porch in the breathless hush just before dawn. The city below is a sea of deep blue shadows, the eastern horizon a thin band of molten gold. The 6 caryatids loom in the half-light, majestic and serene, their stone faces gazing eternally southward. Lycos has already dusted their arms and the folds of their peploi with the iridescent abalone powder. They shimmer faintly, like statues touched by starlight. The space between them is tight wingspan clearance measured in finger widths by a nervous Lysander. Position Alpha, Lysander whispers, positioning Pericles on a temporary perch near the porch's northeast corner. Flight path, south along the inner colonnade, weave between Cora and Frasicalia, bank west around the corner caryatid, loop back north between Timariti and Ariston, exit north. Hymns, minimal drone. Focus, absolute. He looks at Pericles. Ready, Pericles, show these ladies how it's done. Lycos holds the wicker cage containing the lure, not a glowing moth, but a fat, white temple dove feather tied to a thin leather cord. He swing it along the planned flight path. Pericles' eyes lock onto the feather. Hunger and instinct override stone maidens. Timon raises a hand. Silence descends, broken only by the distant crow of a rooster in the city below. The first sliver of sun breaches the horizon, painting the caryatids' faces with pale gold. Now, Lycos swings the feather lure. Pericles launches. It's breathtaking. He doesn't merely fly, he flows. Silent as thought, he slips into the space between the first 2 caryatids, Cora and Frasicalia. His wings, held in a tight, elegant curve, clear the iridescent dusted stone folds by less than the width of a stylus. No shimmer. No touch. He banks smoothly around the corner caryatid, a whisper of displaced air the only sign of his passage. Back north now, between Timariti and Ariston. The gap here is narrower. Pericles tucks his wings infinitesimally, a minuscule adjustment. He streams through, the dawn light catching the edges of his flight feathers, making him look like a sliver of polished obsidian shot through with fire. He passes the final caryatid, Ariston, and arcs perfectly back towards the starting perch, snatching the dove feather lure from Lycos' hand with a soft snick before landing with barely a rustle, the unscripted hiccup, just as Pericles lands, regal and triumphant. Priestess Phoebe, responsible for the dawn libations at the nearby Pandrosian shrine, steps onto the far end of the porch carrying a bronze jug. She freezes, startled by the sudden apparition of the sacred owl completing an aerial ballet amidst the caryatids at dawn. Her sandal slips on a dew-damp flagstone. She stumbles. The bronze jug flies from her hand, clattering loudly onto the stone floor, echoing like a gong in the silent precinct. Pericles, startled by the sudden crash, flinches. His head snaps around. His talons clench on the perch. And a single, newly grown secondary feather jarred loose by the involuntary flinch detaches. It doesn't drift. It plummets, landing point down with a tiny tink directly onto the polished marble between Priestess Phoebe's bare feet. It points straight at her. Silence. Thick, horrified silence. Phoebe stares at the feather, then up at the owl, her face pale. Timon looks apoplectic. Lysander groans, burying his face in his hands. Lycos mutters, "Oh, Hades." Elpis is the first to move. She glides forward, rock crystal lens already in hand. She doesn't touch the feather. She crouches, peering at its base, its direction, its tip pressed against Phoebe's shadow. The detachment. She murmurs. Sudden shock. Not natural shedding. She examines the tip. Impact point, pristine. No damage. She looks at the direction. pointing directly at the priestess of Pandrosos. Her gaze lifts to meet Phoebe's terrified eyes, then travels to the spilled libation water and barley grains pooling around the fallen jug. Amidst spilled offerings, Timon finds his voice, a strangled rumble. An omen. But, of what disrupted dawn writes Athena's displeasure with Pandrosos or? He stares at the feather pointing at Phoebe, a sign concerning the priestess herself. Lysander scrambles for logic. It was an accident. Pericles startled. Feathers pop out under stress. Ask any molting sparrow. It's biology, not prophecy. Argos, ever the observer, pipes up. Note the trajectory. The feather fell 2.3 cubits. Acceleration consistent with gravitational constant, plus minor downdraft from the Erechthion's unique aerodynamics. No divine intervention detected. Probably. Phoebe looks like she might faint. Or vomit. Or both. Pericles, oblivious to the theological crisis he's triggered, shuffles his talons and lets out a soft, inquisitive quack directed at Lycos. Whereas my moth Elpis slowly rises. She looks from the feather to Phoebe to the spilled offerings. A small, unexpected smile touches her lips. The feather points not at the priestess, she says calmly, her voice cutting through the panic. It points through her shadow, cast by the newly risen sun. See, she gestures. The sun, now a full disk above the horizon, casts Phoebe's long shadow westwards, across the porch. The feather lies precisely along the shadow's central axis. It points towards the spilled offering. Water and grain. Symbols of Demeter's bounty. Elpis turns to Phoebe. The owl's feather, dislodged by surprise, lands pointing to a spill of Demeter's gifts at dawn. It is not an omen of displeasure, priestess. It is a reminder. She picks up the feather carefully. A reminder that even the most sacred vessels, she glances at Pericles, and the most careful rites, she looks at Phoebe, can be disrupted by unexpected tremors. But the bounty, she gestures to the grain scattered on the stone, remains. The dawn still comes. The vigilance, she looks at the feather in her hand, is intact. Clean the spill, priestess. Renew the libation. All is well. The tension evaporates like the morning dew. Phoebe sags with relief, then scrambles to clean the spill with the hem of her robe. Timon lets out a gusty sigh, his beard settling. Lysander mutters, "Thank Athena for Elpis and her shadow interpretations." Pericles receives his overdue moth, crunching it with satisfaction. The caryatids stand unmoved, their stony faces lit by the full dawn. The abalone powder on Cora's arm gleams, untouched. The gauntlet was flown flawlessly. The feather hiccup merely a divine reminder that even perfection has room for spilled barley and startled priestesses. You note it in the log, gauntlet, optimal. Post-flight feather event, managed via shadow analysis. Divine approval, implied. Moth, consumed. Lycos claps you on the back. See feathers. Omens. Spilled breakfast. All in Adon's work for Athena's dry cleaners. Now, help me sweep up this sacred barley before the pigeons declare their omens. The caryatids watch, serene, as the first true business of the Athenian day begins, far below their eternal, stone vigil. The cool, damp sanctuary of the rock-cut chamber feels like a forgotten dream. Here, on the sun-baked southern terrace of the Erechtheion, the world is heat, light, and the soft, insistent buzz of cicadas. Pericles, perched rigidly on a smooth marble plinth usually reserved for votive offerings, looks profoundly out of place, a creature carved from moonlit shadow dumped unceremoniously onto a stage drenched in Apollo's glare. His sleek feathers, so perfect in the lamplight below, seem almost dull under the harsh attic sun. He blinks slowly, his golden eyes narrowed to thin slits, radiating an aura of supreme, silent suffering. This, his posture screams, is an indignity too far. "Welcome to the solar crucible, Pterocopus," Lysander declares, squinting against the glare. He adjusts a large, bleached linen shade sail rigged above Pericles, trying to maximize airflow while minimizing direct sunlight. Phase Gamma, Helios' embrace. Or, as Pericles calls it, the Great Scorch. He gestures to a shallow, polished bronze basin filled with water placed strategically to reflect dappled sunlight onto Pericles' back. Controlled photonic reinforcement. Essential for keratin polymerization and feather shaft calcification. Argos calculated the optimal angle. Mainstream history drop. The Greeks deeply understood the therapeutic power of sunlight. Hippocrates prescribed heliotherapy, sun therapy, for various ailments. Applying it systematically to feather hardening that's niche, even for them. They believed Apollo's rays imparted literal strength and vitality, solidifying the new growth. This ritual blurred the line between practical biology, sunlight aiding vitamin D synthesis, indirectly supporting calcium absorption for strong bones, feather shafts, and solar divinity. Apollo wasn't just the sun god, he was the god of order and structure, qualities desperately needed in fragile new feathers. Weird little nugget: to protect Pericles' light-sensitive eyes, the priests crafted miniature sunglasses from thinly sliced, smoked obsidian. 2 small, oval discs, meticulously ground smooth, set in a lightweight leather frame that looped gently behind his head. Pericles tolerated them with regal disdain, looking like a tiny, disgruntled avian philosopher. They weren't perfect, field of vision was limited, but they beat squinting into oblivion. Historical precedent 0. Temple ingenuity maximum. The scholarly side-eye: how much actual benefit did this Helios embrace provide? Modern ornithology confirms sunlight aids feather development through vitamin D synthesis. However, the intensity and duration used here highly debated. Some historians argue it was largely symbolic, a way to ritually bless the new feathers with Apollo's favor. Others point to recovered temple instructions specifying exact durations based on season and feather type, suggesting observational knowledge. Was it science dressed in ritual robes, or pure solar superstition? The debate simmers like the attic noon. Elpis approaches, holding a small alabaster jar. "Solar infusion bomb," she announces, dipping her fingers into a translucent gel that smells sharply of aloe and crushed rosemary. Cooling, protective, and blessed under the last summer solstice. She begins applying it sparingly to the shafts of Pericles' newest primary feathers, the ones most exposed. Pericles tolerates the touch, but a tiny shiver runs through him as the cool gel hits sun-warmed keratin. Finally, something sensible. Argos, sweating profusely under his own wide-brimmed straw hat, monitors a complex setup, a gnome on a simple sundial stick casting a shadow onto a marked stone slab, a water clock dripping steadily into a calibrated jug, and several dark stones placed around Pericles that he touches periodically, muttering about thermal absorption rates. Ambient temperature, 31 degrees Celsius. Target exposure, 18 minutes. Solar angle, 72 degrees. Keratin saturation estimate, 67%. Proceed. Lysander nods. Initiate Helios protocol. Hymn, Apollo Lycios. Gentle strumming only. No sudden crescendos. Pericles is grumpy enough. A young acolyte with a small lyre begins plucking a slow, repetitive, almost hypnotic melody. It's meant to soothe, but Pericles just fluffs his feathers slightly under the shade sail. Grumpy is an understatement. The vigil, your job is twofold: fan Pericles gently with a broad palm frond to create a cooling breeze avoiding direct feather disturbance. And watch for signs of distress. The signs are subtle but critical: overpreening. If he starts obsessively grooming the sun-exposed feathers, it's irritation. Stop. Panting. Owls don't pant like dogs, but rapid, open beak breathing is bad. Very bad. Wing droop. A subtle lowering of the wingtips signals exhaustion or overheating. Abort. The glare. If the intensity of his slit-eyed stare increases beyond its usual divine disapproval, run. Minute 7. Pericles shifts his weight. A tiny bead of moisture forms near his cere, the soft skin above his beak. You fan a little faster. Argos checks his dark stones. Thermal rise. Acceptable. Proceed. Minute 12. A slight breeze stirs, rustling the shade sail. The reflected light from the bronze basin dances across Pericles' back. He stretches one wing, very slowly, letting the light play along the newly hardened primaries. A soft click escapes him. Not discomfort. Assessment resignation. Lysander notes it. Subject exhibits passive photonic acceptance. Positive. Minute 15. The sun feels heavier, pressing down. Cicadas scream. Pericles' eyes are almost closed now, just thin crescents of gold. His breathing is slow, steady. The aloe gel glistens. The lyre music weaves through the heat haze. You spot a tiny, iridescent green fly attempting to land on Pericles' sun-warmed head. Before you can react, his beak snaps out with viper speed. Snick. The fly vanishes. His eyes don't open. Reflex remains sharp, even in solar purgatory. Distraction neutralized, Lysander murmurs, impressed. Helios focus, unbroken. Minute 18. Argos' water clock gives a soft plink. Time. Cease exposure. Initiate cooldown phase. The lyre stops. Elpis steps forward with a large, soft sponge soaked in water chilled deep in the temple cisterns. She doesn't douse him. She gently presses the cool sponge against his feet, his legs, the less sensitive areas of his body, avoiding the newly bombed feathers. Pericles lets out a shuddering sigh, a sound of profound, feather-deep relief. He leans slightly into the cool touch. Lysander carefully removes the obsidian sunglasses. Pericles blinks rapidly, his pupils dilating slowly to adjust back to the relative gloom under the sail. He looks different. Not just cooler, but harder. The new primary feathers, exposed to Apollo's calculated wrath, seem to have a deeper, more resilient sheen, less like new growth and more like honed metal. The aftermath. He's moved back to a shaded corner of the terrace, perched on a cooler stone block draped with damp linen. Lycos offers him a plain, unadorned moth, a peace offering for enduring the solar ordeal. Pericles takes it, crunching methodically. The fierce glare is gone, replaced by a sort of weary satisfaction. He survived Helios. He is stronger for it. Probably. Timon approaches, holding a small, clear crystal prism up to the sunlight. He directs the fractured rainbow beam onto one of Pericles' newly sun-treated primary feathers. Observe the spectral alignment, he rumbles. The blues and violets, concentrated along the rachis. Apollo's signature. The structure is sound. Blessed by the light. Whether it's science or superstition, the feather does seem to trap the light, holding a faint, rainbow sheen for a second after the prism moves away. As you descend back into the blessed coolness of the underground chamber, the weight of the sun still clinging to your skin, Lysander claps you on the back. One crucible down. Tomorrow, the final inspection. Timon gets out his big crystal and his bigger expectations. Try not to shed any feathers from nervousness. He glances back at the sun-drenched terrace. Pericles he's earned his nap. And maybe an extra moth. Solar fortification burns calories. You follow, the memory of the owl's silent endurance etched beside the shimmer of that prism scattered light on his feather. The vessel of night had faced the day, and emerged not unscathed, but solidified. The great shedding was nearing its end. Only the judgment of the highest priest remained between Pericles and his return to the shoulder of stone Athena, his vigil fully renewed. The cool embrace of the underground chamber feels like sinking into a pool of liquid shadow after the solar crucible. Pericles, back on his familiar olive branch perch beneath the humming evaporative canopy, radiates a new kind of solidity. The harsh glare of Apollo is replaced by the soft, forgiving lamplight, and his feathers drink it in, showing the subtle, resilient sheen earned on the sun-baked terrace. The frantic energy of shedding, the itchy vulnerability of new growth, it's fading, replaced by a quiet, coiled readiness. But before the final flight, before the return to glory, comes the scrutiny. The air crackles with a different tension now. Not the anxious anticipation of feather fall, nor the frantic bustle of dust wars or thermal battles. This is the heavy, silent pressure of judgment. Timon stands before the stone table, not hunched over star charts or feather omens, but arranging objects with ritual precision. Elpis' large rock crystal lens, the thin bronze probe, a shallow dish of purified water, soft linen cloths, and a single, perfect owl feather carved from obsidian. A reference standard. Lysander paces, running a hand through already disheveled hair. Final diagnostics, he mutters, more to himself than anyone. Structural integrity. Barbule engagement. Hydrostatic balance. Luster coefficient. Impact resistance extrapolation. He trails off, eyeing Pericles, who stares back with unnerving calm. Bring it on. Mainstream history drop. This wasn't a vet checkup, it was a sacred audit. Every aspect of the renewed owl was seen as a reflection of Athens' spiritual and civic health. Flawed feathers meant flawed governance, divine disfavor, or looming disaster. The high priest's final inspection was akin to a general reviewing troops before battle. The city's metaphysical defenses rested on this one bird's plumage. Records suggest similar, less publicized audits occurred annually, but the post-molt inspection was the most critical. Weird little nugget, the inspection included a whisper test. Timon would hold a specific, newly hardened primary feather close to his ear and gently stroke its edge with the bronze probe. The sound the barbs made as they slid against each other, a soft shhhk, was believed to indicate structural health. A harsh whisper signaled brittleness, a muted one suggested poor barbule hooking. Timon claimed he could diagnose feather stress levels by its sonic signature. It was avian stethoscopy, millennia early. The scholarly side-eye, how objective was this final judgment? Temple records describe perfect renewals and minor imperfections requiring ritual mitigation, but offer few concrete details. Historians clash. Was it a genuine, meticulous assessment, or a preordained ritual where the owl was always declared fit, barring catastrophe? The discovery of votive offerings depicting owls with slightly asymmetrical feathers suggests some imperfections were tolerated, or perhaps never noticed under divine pressure. The truth remains as opaque as the obsidian feather on Timon's table. Timon turns. His storm cloud beard seems to bristle with concentrated authority. Pericles. Approach the stone of scrutiny. Lycos gently coaxes the owl onto a lower, broader section of the olive branch perch positioned directly beneath the brightest oil lamp. Pericles steps regally onto the designated spot. His golden eyes meet Timon's. The chamber holds its breath. The high priest begins. No hymns. No chants. Just slow, deliberate movement and absolute silence. He starts at the head, not touching, using only the rock crystal lens. He examines every contour feather around Pericles' facial disc, the delicate phyllo plumes near his beak, the alignment of the feathers directing sound to his ears. He moves with glacial slowness. Pericles remains statue still, only his eyes tracking the lens. Next, the body. Timon uses the lens and the bronze probe. He tests the zip of barbules on random contour feathers across Pericles' back, breast, and flanks. The soft shhhk is the only sound. Lysander scribbles frantic notes, sector 4 beta, barbule engagement 99.7%. Minor sonic variants on R7 secondary, harmonic analysis pending. Then, the wings. This is the main event. Timon unfolds each wing with infinite care, supported by lycos to prevent strain. He examines the primaries, the long, powerful flight feathers inch by inch under the lens. He checks the calamus shaft base for any sign of weakness, the vein for symmetry, the tip for splitting. He performs the whisper test on 3 separate primaries, his ear cocked, his expression unreadable. He dips the tip of one primary into the purified water dish, watching it sink spin like he did earlier. Perfectly flat. The tension mounts. He moves to the tail feathers, the rudder and brake. He checks their flexibility, their alignment. Pericles, perhaps bored, or perhaps sensing the scrutiny reaching its peak, lets out a tiny, almost imperceptible yawn. Timon freezes. Lysander drops his stylus. Clatter. The sound is deafening in the silence. Timon's gaze snaps from the tail feather to Pericles' face. The owl stares back, unblinking, his yawn halfway retracted. What lycos coughs? Ah, mandibular realignment post-solar stress tension release, he offers weakly. Timon says nothing. He stares at Pericles. Pericles stares back. The moment stretches. Then, slowly, deliberately, Timon returns to the tail feather. Crisis potentially averted. Finally, the legs and talons. Timon examines the scaled skin, the strength of the grip, the sharpness of the claws. He even checks the tiny feathers on Pericles' toes. Nothing escapes the rock crystal lens. The inspection takes over an hour. The oil lamps burn low. Argos has fallen asleep propped against a wall. Elpis watches, her hands clasped tightly. Lysander looks like he might vibrate apart. Timon steps back. He places the lens, the probe, and the obsidian feather reference on the stone table. He closes his eyes for a long moment, breathing deeply. The chamber is utterly silent, waiting for the divine verdict. Pericles shuffles his talons on the olive wood. Tick. 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 Timon opens his eyes. He doesn't look at Pericles. He looks at the obsidian feather. Then, slowly, he turns to face the assembled priests and you. His voice, when it comes, is a low rumble, devoid of its usual storm, filled instead with a profound, weary certainty. The vessel, he intones, is sound. A collective exhale shudders through the chamber. Lysander sags against the stone table. Elpis smiles, a genuine, relieved expression. Lycos grins, giving Pericles a discreet thumbs up that the owl ignores. Argos snores softly. Timon continues, his gaze sweeping over Pericles. The great shedding is complete. The trials of earth, water, air, and fire have been endured. The feathers are hardened. The structure is flawless. The vigilance. He pauses, meeting Pericles' golden stare, is renewed. Athena's gaze upon Athens remains clear, sharp, and unbroken. He walks to a small, locked cedar box you hadn't noticed before, tucked deep in a niche. He produces a key hanging on a leather thong around his neck, unlocks it, and lifts out a final object, a small, shallow dish carved from a single piece of deep green malachite. Inside it rests a thick, amber gold substance that glows faintly in the lamplight. Sacred ambrosia resin. Not the food of the gods, but a temple concoction, the finest Attic honey, aged myrrh, crushed saffron stamens, and a minute amount of gold leaf, all heated and blended into a viscous, fragrant paste. The seal of renewal, Timon states. He dips a tiny, pure gold spatula into the resin. With ceremonial precision, he approaches Pericles. The owl watches, curious but still. Timon touches the spatula not to feathers, but to the very tip of Pericles' beak, depositing a single, gleaming droplet of the amber resin. Pericles' tongue flicks out, tasting. His pupils dilate slightly. Apparently, divine sealing tastes delicious. With this seal, Timon declares, his voice gaining strength, Pericles, sacred owl of the owl-eyed goddess, is declared fit. Fit to bear her wisdom. Fit to patrol her night. Fit to return to her side. He lowers the spatula. Prepare the vessel. Dawn approaches. The vigil resumes. Lysander scrambles to his feet. Final pre-flight conditioning. Elpis, the calming mist. Lycos, the ceremonial moth. Argos, wake up and check the wind vectors. Pterocopus. Thay, the shine cloth. Make him gleam. The chamber explodes into quiet, purposeful activity. The scrutiny is over. The verdict is passed. Pericles, a tiny drop of sacred ambrosia glistening on his beak like a golden dewdrop, stands tall on his perch. The vessel is ready. The night awaits, the long molt, the dust wars, the solar trials, the feather diplomacy, it all culminates now. One final, silent flight back to the shoulder of stone, back to the watchful gaze over the waking city. The great shedding ends. The eternal vigil begins anew. The malachite dish clicks shut, sealing away the sacred ambrosia resin. The final drop glistens like captured dawn on Pericles' beak, a tiny, edible sun. The declaration hangs in the lamp smoke haze, fit. Renewed. Ready. The chamber, moments ago frozen under Timon's scrutiny, erupts into a flurry of hushed, sacred chaos. It's less a preparation, more a feathered coronation. Ceremonial gleam protocol. Initiate. Lysander barks, snapping his fingers. Elpis produces a square of impossibly soft, undyed linen woven from wool so fine it feels like spun cloud. Not a speck of dust, Pterocopus, she instructs, handing it to you. Gently. Like polishing moonlight. You approach Pericles. He eyes the cloth, then you, with regal tolerance. You begin, barely touching, tracing the contours of his head, his back, his wings. The linen whispers over feathers already sleek, deepening the charcoal grays, making the subtle cream bars glow like ivory under the oil lamps. It's not cleaning, it's illuminating from within. Pericles closes his eyes, a soft prrp vibrating in his throat. Divine spa treatment, accepted. Mainstream history drop. The owl's return to Athena's statue wasn't just zoology, it was civic rebirth theater. The Pan-Athena procession brought Athena a new robe. The owl's return signaled her renewed, living vigilance. Citizens would watch for the owl's reappearance atop the Acropolis as confirmation the goddess remained actively engaged. A missing owl meant divine absence, a terrifying prospect. This dawn flight was the city's annual sigh of relief made visible. Weird little nugget, the priests used a first light feather. Before Pericles launched, Elpis would pluck a single, tiny down feather from his breast, not pulled, but one naturally loose. This feather was placed on a small, silver dish held eastward. As the very first ray of dawn sunlight hit it, the feather was believed to ignite a chain of light guiding Pericles unerringly to the statue. It was less navigation, more celestial symbolism. The feather was later woven into the sacred peplos as a hidden blessing. The scholarly side-eye: how often did the same owl actually return, while temple records imply a single, eternal bird? Skeletal fragments found near the Erechtheion suggest multiple owls lived and died there. Historians clash: was it a continuous lineage presented as one immortal bird, or were replacements discreetly timed with molts, or, mishaps, the perfect renewal narrative was likely powerful propaganda, masking the practical realities of keeping a wild bird alive in captivity for years. The truth, like an owl's silent flight, leaves little trace. Lycos approaches, holding not a moth, but a single, perfect sprig of olive leaves, glistening with dew collected before first light. Athena's branch, he murmurs, offering it to Pericles. The owl leans forward, not to eat, but to gently touch the leaves with his beak, a ritual acknowledgement. Lycos then tucks the sprig into a tiny loop on the specially crafted leather gauntlet he now wears. His boarding pass, he grins. Timon reappears, transformed. He wears a formal, deep blue mantle over his chiton, embroidered with silver owls. He carries the staff of vigilance, a simple rod of aged olive wood topped with a small, exquisitely carved owl of rock crystal. The hour is upon us, he intones, his voice resonant in the pre-dawn stillness. The city stirs. The goddess waits. Lead the vessel forth. You emerge from the temple's secret northern entrance, not into night, but into the velvet hush of false dawn. The world is painted in shades of indigo and charcoal. The stars are fading ghosts, the eastern horizon holds its breath, a thin line of molten pearl. The air is cool, crisp, smelling of damp earth and waking stone. Pericles, perched on Lycos' gauntlet, feels different. Solid. Assured. His gaze sweeps the awakening Acropolis, not with curiosity, but with ownership. The procession is small but solemn, Timon leading with the crystal owl staff, Elpis holding the silver dish with the first light feather angled east, Lysander clutching his precious hygrometer and wind vane just in case, Argos muttering about refractive indices, Lycos bearing the owl, and you, the feather polisher, bringing up the rear. You move silently along the sacred path winding towards the Parthenon, the colossal silhouette of Athena Promachos looming ahead, her spear tip catching the very first hints of the coming sun. You reach the viewing platform west of the Parthenon. Below, Athens is a tapestry of deep blues and greys, pinpricked by the last lingering household lamps. The vast expanse of the night sky is yielding, softening. The silence is profound, broken only by the distant cry of a waking gull over Piraeus. Timon raises the crystal owl staff. Elpis holds the silver dish higher, the tiny down feather a pale smudge in the gloom. Lysander checks his instruments one last time. Argos squints east. Lycos lowers his arm, bringing Pericles level with the platform's edge. facing the distant, shadowed bulk of the Erecthean, where Athena Parthenos stands within her temple. The chain is lit. Elpis whispers suddenly. The first, impossibly bright sliver of the sun breaches the horizon far over the sea. A single, laser-sharp beam lances across the miles, striking the silver dish. The tiny down feather seems to ignite for a split second, blazing white gold. Pericles' head snaps towards it, then fixes unerringly on the distant Erecthean. His muscles coil. Athena Nike. Timon's voice rings out, clear and strong in the stillness. Receive your vigil. Lycos gives the slightest upward nudge with the gauntlet. Pericles launches. It's not the silent, moonlit hunt of the slopes. It's not the tense threading of the caryatids. This is purpose made manifest. Powerful wing beats, deep and resonant, thrum thrum thrum, drive him upwards, gaining height above the propylaea. He catches the first true breath of the dawn wind, a thermal rising off the sun-warmed rock yet to come. He banks, a sharp, clean turn, his silhouette black against the rapidly lightening sky. The newly hardened feathers catch the burgeoning light, not gleaming, but absorbing it, radiating a deep, resilient gray. He becomes a swift, dark arrow shot towards the Erecthean. Below, on the waking streets, figures pause. A potter looks up, shielding his eyes. A baker stops kneading dough. A fisherman mending nets on the Piraeus road points. The owl. Athena's owl returns. Murmurs ripple through the city, swelling into a soft, collective sigh relief, reverence, the sound of a city reassured. Pericles approaches the Erecthean porch. The caryatids stand sentinel, their faces touched by the first gold. He doesn't weave between them this time. He rises above them, clearing the roofline with majestic ease. He circles once, a dark planet orbiting the temple, then angles down. A final, silent glide. He disappears from view into the shadowed embrace of the porch. A heartbeat. 2. The priests hold their breath. Then, movement. High on the shoulder of the towering ivory and gold statue of Athena Parthenos, visible through the temple's eastern columns, a small, familiar shape settles. Pericles. He shuffles his talons, finding his ancient perch. He fluffs his feathers once, a ripple of gray settling into absolute stillness. He faces east, towards the rising sun, towards the awakening city. His golden eyes, reflecting the new dawn, open wide, clear, and utterly vigilant. The vigil has resumed. Lysander lowers his wind vane, a slow smile spreading across his face. Keratin saturation, 100%. Vector alignment, optimal. Divine reinstallation, confirmed. He turns, clapping you and Lycos on the shoulders. Well done, feather wranglers. We didn't break the god's bird. Elpis carefully lowers the silver dish. The down feather, its guiding light spent, is just a feather again. Timon lowers his staff, the tension in his frame dissolving. He looks old, suddenly, but satisfied. Deeply satisfied. Athens stands guarded, he rumbles. Another year assured. Lycos stretches, cracking his back. Right. I'm claiming that ceremonial moth. Pericles might be back on duty, but I just delivered a national treasure on zero sleep. Priorities. He winks at you. Fancy a nap before the sacred broom inventory. You look back towards the Erecthean. Pericles is a small, dark sentinel against the gleaming ivory of the goddess. The first full rays of the sun crown the Acropolis, bathing the temples in gold, igniting the sea beyond Piraeus. The city below is fully awake now, the murmur of life rising like incense. The vessel is home. The feathers are whole. The celestial clock, for now, ticks on. You take a deep breath of the cool dawn air. The great shedding is complete. All that remains is the long, watchful silence. The last echo of Lysander's relieved sigh seems to dissolve into the cool marble of the viewing platform, carried away on a dawn breeze scented with thyme and distant salt. Below, Athens breathes a low, vibrant hum of waking life, carts rattling over stones, market cries blooming like strange, distant flowers, the rhythmic clang of a coppersmith's hammer weaving into the city's steady pulse. High on the Erechtheion, a small, dark shape is now as much a part of the temple's silhouette as the caryatids themselves. Pericles. Settled. Watching. The frantic energy of the shed, the sting of pin feathers, the indignity of solar scrutiny, the dizzying navigation through stone maidens all folded away now, smoothed into the quiet certainty of his vigil. He is become stillness, a feathered anchor in the flowing light of morning. You stand there, not quite ready to leave the high place, the residue of the long night's culmination clinging like sacred dust to your own tired thoughts. Lycos nudges your arm, offering a worn waterskin. The water inside tastes of cool clay and deep cisterns. He's home, Lycos murmurs, his usual gruffness softened by the dawn and the sheer relief of a job improbably, miraculously completed. Back where the marble's cool and the view's worth 1,000 drachmas. Can't blame him. He takes a long swig himself, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, his gaze also fixed on that distant speck of vigilant grey. Funny, isn't it all that fuss? The star charts, the spider silk oil, the great serious panic, all just to get him back to where he started. Just, renewed. He chuckles, a low, rumbling sound. Like polishing an old shield. Shines brighter, but it's still the same metal underneath, guarding the same gate. The gentle descent, the walk back down from the Acropolis isn't a procession anymore, it's a slow unwinding. The priests disperse like dandelion seeds on the breeze timon towards the inner sanctums, bearing the crystal owl staff like a scepter of fulfilled duty, Elpis cradling the now empty silver dish, her steps light, a small, private smile on her lips, Argos already muttering about recalibrating his hygrometer pots for standard divine ambience monitoring, Lysander clutching his wax tablet, doubtless mentally drafting the official post-molt vigil resumption report with headings and subheadings. Only you and Lycos amble slowly along the worn limestone path, the city unfurling below like a rumpled, sun-warmed blanket. The scent of baking bread begins to rise, thick and comforting, weaving with the sharper tang of seaweed from Piraeus. A shepherd's flute, impossibly distant and sweet, threads through the morning air from the slopes of high meadows, a counterpoint to the waking city's murmur. The unanswered whispers, did the stars truly dictate the perfect moment for that first feather to fall? Did the crushed cuttlebone and solstice honey truly forge stronger shafts? Or was it simply the devoted care, the unwavering attention paid to a single, small life bearing the weight of a city's hope? Did Pericles sense the celestial clock within him, or was he just itchy? The scholars in the Agora will argue over scrolls, debate the weight of spider silk versus divine favor, dissect Elpis' shadow interpretations for generations. The precise calibration of the astrolabe, the thermal conductivity of damp linen, the aerodynamic implications of a single misaligned barbule in Sector 7 Alpha, these become footnotes in dusty texts, puzzles for minds that seek to cage the moon in geometry. The truth, perhaps, flutters somewhere between the meticulous records and the silent, golden-eyed gaze now fixed on the waking world, a truth woven from devotion, superstition, biology, and a city's desperate need to believe its guardian was eternally renewed. The softening gaze, the sharp edges of the night's drama blur in the strengthening sun. The memory of frantic feather plotting, the tang of sacred vinegar, the heart-stopping thwack of wing against stone, they soften, receding like the last stubborn shadows clinging to the western colonnades. What remains is the feel of impossibly soft down beneath the dice, the cool weight of the astrolabe in uncertain hands, the silent, powerful surge of wings catching the first true dawn thermal, the profound, feather-deep sigh of an owl finally cooling after Apollo's trial. The precise why of every ritual fades, leaving only the feeling, the quiet awe of witnessing life meticulously, reverently sustained. You pause at the edge of the agora, already bustling. A fishmonger shouts prices, children chase a leather ball, an old man slowly sweeps the stoa steps. Above it all, unseen but felt, the tiny guardian watches. His renewed feathers are just feathers now, not subjects of scrutiny, but instruments of silent flight, of keen sight in the deepening dusk yet to come. The celestial timetable that governed every step of his renewal melts into the simple, eternal rhythm of day following night, vigilance following rest. The gears of the cosmos turn, yes, but here, in the warm press of the morning crowd, the scent of figs and fish thick in the air, it feels simpler. It feels like the city breathes, protected. It feels like, enough. The image of the owl high on the goddess's shoulder lingers, but it's softening now, blending with the gentle murmur rising from the streets below, a lullaby woven from cartwheels and distant lyres, the sigh of the sea against Piraeus' walls, the drowsy hum of bees already seeking the first blooms on the Acropolis slopes. That fierce, golden-eyed focus, the culmination of months of sacred toil, begins to dissolve into the warm haze of the Attic morning, like incense smoke curling towards an indifferent sky. You feel the rough-hewn coolness of the stones beneath you, or perhaps it's the smooth linen of your own sleeping place far away, the boundaries between marble and mattress, between ancient lamp glow and the soft blink of your night light, becoming beautifully, drowsily indistinct. The precise names of stars, Scorpius, Sirius, fade into a general, comforting glitter, a dusting of light across the vast, velvety ceiling of your mind. The scent shifts from temple incense and sacred sesame oil to maybe the faint trace of lavender on your pillow, or the clean, cool air drifting through your slightly open window. The rhythmic shhhk of the dice smoothing feathers becomes the whisper of leaves outside, or the steady, soothing whir of a fan. Lyco's grumble about sacred barley transforms into the distant, comforting rumble of a neighbor's appliance, a sound as constant as the tides. The tension, the meticulous care, the weight of celestial schedules and civic omens, it all ebbs away. What remains is a profound sense of quiet watchfulness, high and serene. A silent guardian, perched not on cold ivory, but on the sturdy branch of your own drifting thoughts. The city he guards isn't Athens of marble and strife, but the peaceful, sprawling landscape of your own slowing mind, its streets dimming, its noises softening into the gentle susurrus of your own breath. The meticulous record-keeping ends. The feather compass spins freely, points dissolving. There are no more duties, no more omens to interpret, only the deep, velvety darkness behind your eyelids, and the gentle certainty that somewhere, high above the fading world, watchful and renewed, rests a feather-soft sentinel. The stars wheel unseen. The moon prepares her silver path. You are held. You are safe. Let the quiet deepen. Let the last thought be the softest sigh against your pillow, the final release into the warm, waiting embrace of sleep. The vigil continues, somewhere far away. Your watch is done. Sweet dreams.